This show is sponsored by the Comics Shop. We hope you enjoy the show.
All right, good evening. Welcome to another episode of Tuesday Chinwag. My name is Lee Chalker, the creator of the Australian independent comic book Battle for Bustle, published through ComX. Now, ComX is streamed across two live stream channels. One is ComX, the other is Aussieverse. Because I'm limited for time this evening, there will be a yellow ticker box somewhere, addresses around. I do implore you to check out both of these sites, like and subscribe them anywhere you can find them, because it is in a positive nature for all things Australian comics, creatives, and if you're interested in all this sort of stuff, you will find great interest in those channels. So, this is the biggest show that I have done on Chinwag, so forgive me if I get a little bit diddly-diddly-day. That's my code word for blah, 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 and, on with the show. So, look, this evening's show is, I would say one of the healthiest Australian comic book publishers in Australia currently at the moment, and it is Reverie Publications. I am here with my special guest, the White Cat, up there, and that will just randomly be appearing on the show. And for everyone sending in comments, feel free. If you want to say hello and, get a little bit of cat bottom in your life when you're in the So, everyone, thank you for your support. Say, welcome, comment, beautiful. So, going around the room, I'm going to start down in the bottom right-hand corner to me. I have Mr. Danny Nolan. Good evening, sir. Hey, I have Mr. Dave DeVries. How are you, sir? I have my great mate and very happy birthday to you, Mr. Robert Spedsy Lyle. I have another great mate, Mr. Ben Sullivan, in the house. Hello. I have Peter J. Lawson. Hello. I have Eli Aberdeen. Hello, sir. I have Peter Lane. How are you, sir? I have Tad Pietrowski. How are you, sir? And
here I am.
Have the main man, which I'm going to start with, the brains behind Reverie when it all kicked off many years ago. A man that I would be remiss if I didn't share with you that several years ago, when I wasn't doing comic books, this gentleman gave me the opportunity to print and publish Battle for Bustle for the first time, and for that I am forever grateful. And I wish him a very warm welcome, Mr. Gary Della. How are you, sir?
Very good. I'm very honoured to be here along with all my guests, and it's a great privilege.
Thank you, mate. It's great to have you here. It's great to have all of you here. So I will try and wrangle some control here this evening, but there's a heap of creatives. They've all been busy. You're about to hear what's happening in the Reverie Publications world, but I am going to start with Gary because he is the man. So Gary, mate, who?
Well, Reverie basically, everybody's heard it before, it started off in 83, probably a couple of years before that, because we just got together and a group of us and said, basically, we're just going to put a comic out, and we did. And we didn't realise at the time that it was going to take off that much. And unfortunately, with Good and Gotcha the way it was, later on down the track, we realised that we'd done really well, but the figures that come through were very late, 3 or 4 years later. But in the meantime, we had to cancel it because of that. However, the repercussions of doing that comic way back then hasn't stopped. And what happened was that I was constantly getting emails and letters and saying, when are you going to bring the comics back? We really need it. And I just kept putting it off. And then basically in 2018, we said, that's it. We're going to put out a trade and see how it goes. And that trade was put out in, like I said, 2018. And put it through the Kickstarter, plus through all the tables we did at the time, and it actually sold quite well. So that sort of indicated to me that we'll get stuck into it again. The other thing is also with the comics in general is that, as you know, with everybody here, is that I like to promote everybody and everybody if we can, because everybody needs it, we all want it, and we all enjoy what we're doing. So that's why a lot of us are here now, because we've got our own IPs, you've got their own creative talents, and the best way to do that is get a group together and just promote it. And that's what's happening, and that's why we're here today.
Thank you, sir. I also think it's a great, one of those things that Comex and myself like to promote a lot is like the community of creators as well. And I mean, like, wow, man, like sitting here, I mean, I'm with people I've admired, I've worked with, and I've watched from afar. A gentleman I'm just meeting now that, is about to drop his first comic book and should be very proud from the little glimpse that I've seen already from the hard work. And I'm really looking forward to tonight's show, to be in all of your company. So, I really do want to get to see, and I want the people to see all the work that Reverie Publications does as well. Because Dave Dive, wow, what a lineup. G'day to everyone. And hello to Mr. Dave Dive. Hello, Nick May. How are you, mates? And, we've got a soldier down, but, he'll come back. It's, look, what it boils down to is just for everyone at home tonight. Now that I've calmed down a little bit, because I got a little bit like, woo, before it's like it was all too much for me. I can get a bit overexcited, but, like a little bit of zen kicked in there, so we'll see how we go. Reverie have, I guess, with just from my background with you guys is like, and for the people watching, Gary gave me a shot with Battle for Bustle when I wasn't even on the blip, and I randomly contacted him one day after seeing a Facebook site pop up. And a quote that my dad told me a long time ago when I was a little boy and he was alive was always, always look at life with reverie. And at that particular point in time, I'd seriously damaged my back, been laid up on the floor quite literally for upwards of 6 months, not having any idea what I was going to do with myself. Had continued to draw through my teens and into my early 20s, this story. And for some particular reason, that ad and Reverie stuck in my mind, and I reached out to Gary. The funny story is I said, Gary, I've got a couple of comic books I want to publish. And Gary said, oh, yeah. And I'm sure in his mind he thought, I've heard that before. And he said, why don't you send me 8 pages? So I think I sent him about 50. And then from that point on, Gary helped me, I guess, start. Got issue 1 out, which is one of the proudest moments I've ever had. So for that, I am forever grateful. And that little nudge in the right direction and the chance that he took on me has led in this moment to myself being in the presence of 9 people that I greatly admire for their very strong work ethic, what they've done for Australian comic books, and they continue to do so, whether it's through creating comic books or live streaming or interviews or being positive mentors to other people coming up through the ranks. And I think that's fantastic. So community really is awesome. And check out Reverie Publications website. Go and buy some books, and you'll hear about all the books and Kickstarters that you can jump onto very shortly. So I guess Omnibo, how are you, buddy? Where's the Olsen twins? This is a full house. Butter Ching. Yeah, all right. Yeah, all right. Thank you for tuning in, Omni. Now, I'm going to start, I guess. There's a lot of things happening here because there's a web going on, as you will find out throughout the evening. So what I'm going to do, hello, Alex. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the man who is about to release his first comic book. And Gary, I'm going to get you to jump in here with Eli. Please feel free, everyone, to talk, have a yarn. This is free. This is absolutely everyone to Chinwag. This is what the show is all about. It is fluid. So, Eli, son of me, my mate, how are you? And congratulations. Book.
Thank you very much.
Tell me about yourself.
I about 10 years ago, I decided if I don't start writing comics, I'm never going to write them. So I started writing a comic with my mate who was doing my tattoos. So I had a look at his artwork. I said, "Have you ever thought of drawing a comic?" He said, "I'd love to, but I can't write." I said, "Mate, I'd love to write a comic, but I can't draw." And so in 28 hours of tattooing, we worked out what we were going to do, and we started writing our futuristic mishmash of all the genres we liked. And this is Son of Man. And then,
Beautiful.
10 years later, I met a publishing group, and we're re-releasing them all in single-issue format now.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So it was originally set up in like a bit of a trade, was it, mate? Like it's a big comic book.
We recently set up as graphic novel type formats.
Yeah.
I've got 4 trade paperbacks that I've got printed. I've got a 5th trade paperback drawn and written, but haven't printed it yet. But I think that it's a much better fit for it to come out in individual issues. And I'm re-lettering it and redesigning it to sort of fit more in with the Reverie style of comic book presentation.
Yep.
And also, originally, I was just doing what I felt would be cool and just borrowing from a lot of different styles that I'd read over the years. But now that I've fallen in with this new group of creatives, I'm actually getting told, "No, why don't you try doing this?" and shown a better way to do things.
Yeah.
So, particularly that bloke Spedsy has helped me very, very much so with designing sound effects and with lettering placements.
Oh, he's a wizard, that man, isn't he? Hey? Hey?
Thanks, man.
Bloody
And he's a
wizard,
birthday
that
wizard today.
Yeah, he is. So let's not forget
28
that. Everyone
today.
in the comments, throw out that you're 28 today, mate. I tell you,
Yeah.
what's Spedsy?
That's what you tell us, though, Rob. That's
Getting
what you
close
tell
to
us.
30. Oh, golly.
Yeah. I'm a little bit older than you, Spedsy, so you'll have to.
That's the joke. Yeah, no.
mate, you know,
I
like
wish I was close to
like
30, but alas.
Yeah, I know. Eli, one of the things that I greatly appreciate and what I've learned doing all of these chinwags, man, is people reaching out to others and getting a sort of a mentorship in the creative side of comic books. And, with the mentoring ship, you get to meet other people, like you've met Spedsy, giving you a hand. You've met Gary and stuff like that. I think mentoring is a really strong, it just infuses the creative side of things, man. Because look, I was a bit of an egghead and I did everything by myself when I started and was a bit of an ego freak. And then Gary came along and Gary stripped me down to nothing, man. and said, "No, man, think about this, and that." And you know what? 100% right. And how did you find coming out of your little your little area with you and your mate doing all of this comic book work, man, to like finding Reverie and then getting Gary and Spedsy to jump on board and give you a few little pointers? What was that like for you?
It was all a big inspiration for me is actor Danny Trejo. I don't know if you know his story. You know who I'm talking about, though, Machete.
Yeah.
And, he was a criminal, and he got picked up by a director. Said, "I want somebody to teach." What's Julia Roberts' brother? Eric Roberts.
Yep.
They needed somebody to train Eric Roberts how to box. And so Danny Trejo put his hand up. He said, "I can do that." And then from there, he just decided then and there he's going to start being nice to people and start helping people. And he's acting in big name movies and he's headlining and all that stuff just from being nice to people.
Yeah.
And I found that quite inspiring. And I thought, I wonder what will happen if I start being nice to people.
And what have you found by being nice, mate? Is like stuff coming to you? Is it good stuff?
He's a wicked boxer now, Eli. Yeah.
Sorry, what was it?
You're a wicked boxer now. It worked out.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm just glad that was Danny Trejo's story, because whatever his story was, I was going to copy it. I'm glad I didn't go further back into enjoy
Well,
some.
at least you didn't end up in the real life machete, mate. So I suppose
Yeah,
it's good for
exactly.
everything. There's a good act of kindness there. But kindness goes a long way, mate. It's good to treat people kindly and put a smile on people's faces. You never know what door that's going to open, man. So good on you.
Yeah, that's it. When I got
when
my very first comic printed, sorry.
You're right, bud. You continue.
I say when I got my very first comic printed, I took it to Evil Empire Comics in Brunswick back when they were open, and I showed Phil, the guy that works there. He said, "Oh, you should go to a comic launch this weekend. There'll be heaps of people there that do all this sort of stuff." And so I actually went to the comic meet, and I met Brendan Halliday, and I fell in with the Melbourne Comic Creators group that have their monthly meetings. And then just follow the chain of dominoes. Met people, talked to people, and really, Gary's got so much charisma and so much energy. If he walks in the room and you don't notice him, there's something wrong. You've got your eyes closed or something. So that was it. I met Gary, we hit it off, and here we are, a few years later.
Yeah, that's great, man. No, I'm really happy for you, dude. You must be super excited, man. So you're with a good crew of people. Yeah, and can't go wrong, man. There's a lot of people. It's a great feeling getting your first comic book out, man. It's probably one of the best comic book feelings I've had doing comic books anyway. So I'm excited for you, man, for when it launches, and we've had a little look at the proof tonight and stuff, and feel free to continue to join in tonight, Eli, and I will, because we've got such a big show, mate, I will endeavour to bounce back to you this evening. But thank you so much for that little touch on where you've come from.
One final point, Lee. It's not just Spezzy that I've met that's helped me. He's been great, but everybody else that's pictured here has given me some sort of advice or some sort of inspiration or some sort of motivation to keep going. So Tad was a great editor. I only worked with him for a little while, but I hope to work with him again soon.
Yep.
Pete's hilarious. That is all. Oh, sorry, Peter Lane.
Well, hey, that's
you got your choice.
Peter Lawson's complimented my lettering.
Eli, honestly, man, you're in great esteem. I mean, Tad, 40-year, Dark Nebula, one of the great Australian comic books, man. The first Australian comic book that I ever picked up off the shelf. Tad knows that. Dave DeVries down here, Southern Squadron, varying Marvel, DC, a whole heap of stuff, man. You know what I mean? Long, great careers, man, doing comic books. I mean, Danny, all of these guys, man, it's a good crew, mate, so you're very lucky, man. All right, Eli, love you. I'll be back. All right. Now make sure that cat keeps its bum your way, all right? Because there's people out there might be a bit whoa,
all
right.
My eyes. I must put out my eyes.
I don't want everyone blinded, man. An email. That cat's bottom fully offended me. It's I'll add it to my file of complaints, mate. Somewhere. But anyway,
it's definitely going to be a video now. So there you go.
All right, very good. All right, Eli, I'm going to duck out of here. Now, Gary, you stay with me here, man. If I'm missing anything, you got to back me up, because it's your crew and you're the man. So I'm going to go to all the dudes that are doing single stuff at the moment before I get into the intricate web of creators and creativity. So I'm going to go to a gentleman over on my top right, because he's very quiet. And I noticed in a comment today that he said he would join into things and he'd want to be a little bit anonymous. Well, you're not anonymous right now, Danny Nolan. So how are you, mate? How are you? Going all right?
Oh, I'm very good, thank you. I would like to tell a little bit of a story about Gary.
You most certainly may.
I was at Alternate Worlds in Bayswater, which is basically where I've personally met everyone here except for Dave and you, Lee, the great comic book shop that is there. And I picked up a bit of a history bug, especially with Australian comics, about I don't know, about nearly a decade ago, and I picked up this, and you know, I'd always heard of Reverie, but didn't know whether they were still going. Now, not long after that, Nat Carmichael's Oi 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 went belly up. He wasn't going to publish any more comics, these anthologies. And then all of a sudden, Reverie popped up again in Facebook. I don't know how I got hold of it, and I had two stories that were going to appear in Oi Oi Oi, one with Dave Guy and one with Ben Michael Byrne from Cranbourne. And so I just said, "Hey Gary, do you want these for your anthology?" And he said, "I'll take anything you've got." And so the bar was low, and he and that started a relationship where he actually asked me if I wanted to write one of the Rick McClune stories, which led to another one, which is number 6. I did number 4 and then number 6. And I must admit, I'm moving away from stories now, writing, and the history bug has really got me, and especially when it comes to Australian comics. So I started writing history pieces, and then Gary was asking for reviews on old comics and little bits of history, and that's now working its way into the back of current Reverie comics as part of the fanzine at the end. That's the beauty about these comics, is you have a comic, and then at the end you have input from the readers. So you have a reader section, then you have little bits and pieces about writers writing about their stories, or the artists writing about their stories, and then there's little bits of history. So Gary's not only made a comic, but he's got this little bit of history. So or the fanzine part of it. So it's fun. It is really great to just, once you finish the comic, you've got this thing that makes you want to go, oh, okay, I'm going to keep this a little bit longer. It's just not the duration of the story. There's a lot more stuff you can find out about Reverie and what's coming up with the comics, or what people thought of the story beforehand. So it's fun, and I love that. That's more inclusive, and that does build the community as well. So people see that and go, "Oh, I can be part of this."
Yeah, I love that idea, actually, Danny and Gary, because one of the things when I was reading comic books as a kid, particularly Marvel, and Marvel were very, were quite in the 80s, particularly in late 70s with Dad's stuff. They were, and even the earlier stuff. They included their readers in not just the story, but with the letter pages and what was coming next, and all of the varying ads that they'd have through it, and even the writing, and it really made you feel like you were part of it. You felt like you were part of their history as well as they were going along. So is the fanzine, and there's some of it now for anyone that's looking. Gary's holding it up. Obviously, the fanzine, is it just based currently on the history of Reverie, or is it going to, being in a Reverie book, or does it scope out amongst the history of Australian comics itself?
Well, the first section was, I think the first one we did, I did this 5,000 word essay on comic books during the 1970s, Australian publishing and comics, which was an exciting time for editorial comics and for the street press, but not for Australian published comics, because it's just stuff pounding everywhere. And so that was fun. The 80s is something that's it's going to be hard, because as soon as the 70s clicked into the 80s, the Australian comics went crazy. There's no doubt Dave and Kate and Gary will testament, because we all had comics come out in the 80s, and it was like a renaissance. It's kind of a bit like what was happening a few years ago and still continuing on now in this time. So there was that story, which is broken down, but I think the first stuff I did with Gary was writing about my experience of doing a a comic. So that was about the Rick McClune comic. And the other stuff was Gary's got this amazing collection of Australian comics. It's massive, probably one of the biggest in Australia. And he keeps sending me these weird 1940s comics. And I've just been doing a review here and a review there. And it's really great seeing what people read in those days and what they experienced in storytelling. Like these days, nobody would probably accept those kind of comics and the way that they're written and all that jazz. But you've got to look at it with a critical eye from somebody from the 1950s or the 1940s, and it's a fun experience. But saying that, I think the most wonderful thing I've been doing with Gary at the moment, and I've lost the piece of paper, is Gary was kind enough to lend us or give us free rein with Toby and the Magic Pencil. So I've taken it since I've retired from work. I've spent a lot more time with my local newspaper, and so one day we were talking and we thought, wouldn't it be great, since all the newspapers are dropping comics, that we bring a comic back into the newspaper? Gary said, that'd be great. Here you can have you can have Toby. And we're a monthly paper, so that was 24 months basically of material. And it's been very popular. We get a lot of feedback, and at the moment we're having a competition as well to there we go, lovely. For people to comment on it, and just so we can get a better understanding of what people think of having comics back in the newspapers. So I want to thank Gary for being a real trendsetter. When everybody else is throwing them out the door, Gary just says, "Here, take mine free of charge." And believe me, it is a great comic, and it's well put together. Ben's the best artist in Australia as far as I'm concerned, and Gary's story is just manic. I love Toby because the story can change on a sixpence every page, and I think that's what draws. There's one page per issue, and if you miss an issue, you can miss what's going on in the whole story. It just throws you out. So people are pretty much really stuck on it, and they're loving it. So thank you, Reverie, for that. It's probably one of the best things that's happened to our paper. It's actually made it more inclusive, because papers these days tend to be a tactile thing that all the boomers like. We needed something for a younger audience, and it's worked. It's actually got kids grabbing the paper off mum and dad, and they have it. Oh, I've got to read that, as opposed, because we don't have a sports section, so comics will have to do it.
That's great, man. That's great. And for people that are listening for the first time, that's I'm just going to surmise here, like from my experience in it, that probably comic books aren't as popular as what they once was. And there was a shocking period maybe 12 months ago where cartoons and stuff were pulled out of newspapers, which, I'm sure we on the screen all share a not so positive opinion of what whoever made those decisions for whatever reasons. But to see Reverie and gentlemen like Gary and Danny, putting comic books out into newspapers, trying to reach new audiences, keep the medium itself alive, is a positive thing, because already from the gentlemen we spoke to tonight out there, we can see that they're vibing, they're interested, they love this stuff. You don't do this stuff unless you love it, man. We must be crazy. This must be the most crazy people on the screen. It's love and it's passion, and I don't know what you call it, a compulsion. I would suggest even the dog is going ape, man. They're keen as well. See, this is what happens in the fluidity of the Chinwag. You got cat bums and you got dog barks. It's all happening. All right, Danny, thank you, mate. I will come back to you as quickly as I can, we'll just keep rolling. Everyone feel free. Thank you very much for the comments. I'm going to go to another man that is doing this stuff by himself, Peter Wilson. Look at that lineup. Iconic. Good stuff. Mate, and Peter, congratulations on Foes, mate. Well done. Great comic. Enjoyed it immensely. I'm going to go to another Peter because, like there's two Peters on the screen. Which Peter should I go to? I'm going to go to the one on the outside left, Mr. Peter Lane. And, mates, one of the most original ideas that myself has seen, like not that I read every comic book as I would try to, but I am very busy trying to create my own. Sometimes things slip through the cracks, but yours did not. And we've had quite a lot. Happy birthday, Robert, from Nick May. And we've had quite a lot to do with each other, just chatting and gas bagging and stuff over the years. And Sky's Cavern Library is, I thought it was a really original storybook, man, one you should be proud of. I appreciated your dedication to the story because it has gone for a long time. It's sort of similar, like I guess parallel to like where I was at, like starting and, and then finally getting it out in the pandemic and things like that. Haven't seen you for a while, so where you at with guys? Like, what's happening? What's on the agenda, the horizon? What's happening? Boom. Hope you got that Jason Paulos working, mate. Keeping him under the wood. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm always annoying that guy.
Yeah.
He's always swearing at me all the time.
He's a good guy.
Well, first off, I'll show you what Rob's done for me recently.
Yeah.
It comes up on camera. There's a new logo that's going to be on future issues.
Yep.
So I'll just bring that up. See if I can bring it up here. Can you see that?
I can. If you hold that there, mate, there says, hey, look at him, like magic. There we go. That's the new library, the new logo.
Yeah, it's more emphasis on the skies part because the logo before, I just kind of got the idea that the skies was getting lost a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
You can see the Cavern Library a lot more than you could the skies, and that's what it's about is sky. So, so I've changed that. There it is. Thanks, Rob.
And there's the old one. Yeah. Well, everything, change is the only constant, mate. We're storytellers. We know this. So sometimes you got to change the title, I guess. That's how it is. So what issue you up to? Like these days, like 4 or 5. I mean, you got a couple of these dudes here, like Spedsy's. Spedsy's everywhere, man. You know what I mean? Like, where are you? You must be like,
all over the shop.
Like not enough butter on toast, mate. They'll call you spread out Spedsy.
He's the Mike Patton of the Aussie comic industry.
Oh, yeah.
I'll take it.
Yeah. Too, actually. It's like people call me worse things than that, so it's like it's a good one. But all right, so mate, quick rundown for everyone. Sky's been going along pretty well. It's you're very, like you're pumping out stuff. I see you getting around to a lot of festivals and conventions and comic book days, in all through Melbourne and Victoria and stuff. So you're very active in the community down there. What are your plans like with this new logo and stuff? What do you got coming out?
Well, the next issue 5 has got a tale by Spedsy in it. It's also got a new Jason Paulos one in there. Which kind of follows on from the events of previous issues. And if all goes well, there's a Ryan Vella one in there as well, which kind of has Sky dip his toe into the Reverie universe a lot more. So you'll see little cameos from certain characters. Torn and Toby and the Magic Pencil, and it should be good. Issue 6 is a Hairbutt the Hippo crossover.
Oh, lovely. Yes.
Paulos. There'll be a lot more Paulos coming out, so he'll be in issue 7 as well. There'll be a return of Spell Kitty in a story. It's quite a bit coming out. I've also had discussions with some gentlemen on the panel here. I don't know if I can go into that or not.
Yeah, go ahead. Whatever.
There may be a Dark Nebula Skies Cavern Library one-shot. There might also be a Southern Squadron Skies Cavern Library one-shot in the future.
How good is that?
Yeah.
That's outstanding. Oh man, that excites me, man. That's really cool. Dave, Tad, look at you two go, giving your characters, like giving them life with all these new characters. Man, I love the community. It's a beautiful thing. It's and you know what's really weird is we mentioned Jason Paulos tonight, and I mentioned earlier this is how all interconnected this stuff is from all sides of Australia. It's really weird that the first comic book I ever bought was a Dark Nebula comic book, and it was Jason Paulos. Tad was writing, and Dave was writing, and Jason Paulos was the artist, and a very young Jason Paulos started in that comic book, and I enjoyed that comic book immensely, as you can obviously tell because I don't stop talking about the thing. I should probably get it tattooed on me. Anyway, maybe that's a pickles moment. So moving on, and back to you, mate, because I do like, I had to drop a pickles in there. Come on, mate, that's no pickles moment because dropping pickles, who knows?
I love pickles.
Connotations to that, but I digress. So I'm just going to go straight into Peter J. Lawson, who, mate, I haven't seen you in a long time. I must congratulate you. I must congratulate you on the Human Fly and the very, very hard work that you put into your artwork. And I've been watching you, man, and I have to say you are possibly the most improved artist that I've seen in the scene for a while, and that's a testament to your hard work. And good on you, bud. It's well done. So,
we all work.
That's cool, man. So we're going to talk about your Reverie work because first time I came across you was in the Torn universe, and you got man, I like the fact that this is off the topic as well, but connected as well. Isn't it all strange? Everything's connected, so the universe shows. You were drawing pictures of Townsville in like one of your latest Torn comic books, and I'm looking at these landscapes, and you know what I'm thinking, dude, I want to live there because I live in Townsville, and yours look better than reality. So I think that's a credit to you, man.
A lot of references used for that one.
Yeah. Well, I liked your version of the Sugar Shaker and stuff. The Sugar Shaker's that weird sugar shaking looking building, but you did well, so it was really well done. And man, so you got Torn 3 and Torn 4 coming up soon. They're about to drop. How you feeling about those, man?
Good. There's been a lot of work. Eli, of course, had his input into Torn 3. Tad jumped in as editor. Between them, they worked the script into something that I think all three of us are pretty proud of, and I think Barry is as well. It's actually a really solid little comic. I put everything I had into the art on that one. Just taking everything that the other guys were saying before in this community, how you talk to other people and you collaborate, you get feedback. And every bit of feedback I've gotten from people about how I'm drawing and what I could do better, I just took it all and put it all into that comic. So it's pretty much, I've just laid everything on the table on that one. And feedback I'm getting has been pretty good, thank goodness. People seem to like it. It's come up good, and I think issue 4's going to look hopefully better, yeah.
Yeah, no, good on you, man. You should be proud. It doesn't look wicked, man.
As well, which is new for me.
Yeah.
So, I've been feeding that script through to Tad as we go, and that's come up interesting.
Yeah, very nice, very nice. And I see there's a lovely Tony Menzies cover on the front of that Torn comic there.
Isn't that great?
Yeah. He's another marvel, that dude. There you go. Look at that. Look at some of that artwork. Lovely. Look at the motion, man. Look at the storytelling. Good stuff.
That was one of the things I got told after the first issue. Sat down with the guy, and he went through everything. And he's like, you've got to push your action harder. You've got to make the motion more. You've got to stretch your figures. You've got to watch how you're hitting the edge of frame and all that sort of stuff. And just pushing that sort of action stuff has been a real big thing for me, along with drawing the female character. I wasn't doing that well, and then I had to sit here and study anatomy more and work all that sort of stuff out. It's been fun.
Yeah.
Your
hard work, man. It does come through because it's like I'm seeing you do I sat down today and just thought I'd draw Wonder Woman, and I'm looking at you drawing Wonder Woman, and I'm like, man, I'd read that Wonder Woman comic book. I'd read that, it's like, I think you're an excellent female superheroine character.
I still find certain angles I can't get, but it's all about growth and working on it. And
absolutely.
Anyone here will tell you the same thing. They've all got things they don't think they quite nail, and they're working on it all the time to get that.
Yeah. Well, man, if you stop learning, I mean, geez, you got to learn every day, don't you? So you got to keep learning. It's like there's no perfection, so you just got to keep rolling, man. Do the best you can, put it out, move on to the next one, try and do better. The
main goal is everyone would agree. The main goal we've got is to make the next issue better than the last one.
That's right, man. That's 100% right. Yeah. I think you're going in the right direction, man. I'm excited to see what's happening in the Torn universe, and thankfully, the last one I read, man. And Gary, we'll come back to this later on because, occasionally you get a few people, I see on the face because, I'm not on socials all the time, but, we've had a chuckle about this before. And it's like, Torn issue 1093 might come out. And then suddenly, 2 months later, issue 41 drops, mate. So, I mean, for everyone out there that still has questions about that, there is a reason for this, and it does make sense. I'll let Gary quickly just give you the reason why it's just out of sequence, so you don't think it's all loopy. But why is it out of sequence, Gary? So the people that don't know,
it's a very good way to get a talking piece out there, so that we can talk about Torn. Then naturally it's working, you see. So at the end of the day, the reason why that is because I've come through DC and Marvel, especially Marvel coming with the situation where all of a sudden they just stopped. The numbering system stopped. And then they go to their issue 1 of Spider-Man about 20 times with three or four different titles. And it gets to the point where a collector cannot keep up with the money that's going out for those comics. So in the wisdom that I had, I decided that, okay, well, the idea is to basically with Torn, and it's worked with the other ones too, is get 3 story arcs, put them all together, and have about 6 or 7 creatives working on it. So therefore, what that gives you is basically up to about 54 comics that we've got working on, and we just release them temporary to let them know that it's a lot of things are happening.
Yep.
So that's the beauty about it. But we're basically doing 3, so 4 come out, 5 will come out, but we're going to have a massive amount of backlog to really push out. So it's going to be a very interesting way of seeing things.
Yeah. I'm just having Gary. Thank you very much for that. For that answer, because it does make sense. I mean, like creatives do take a little bit longer than some to get things out. So, but the best thing is that it's out, and in the end, when all these things catch up, it's fantastic. But I will just let people at home know, just because this is a Chinwag, we have a little chat going on the side of the screen here that just keeps us all up to date. And I'm not going to embarrass anyone in particular, but at the same time that Gary Della was just talking about pushing issues out there, there was a discussion of someone doing something in their residence that may not have been pleasant
Sorry, mate.
But it was very amusing. That's why we were all having a chuckle. I don't mean to digress, but I want to involve the people because it is all about fun too, man.
Peebo.
you can't all be serious all the time. You got to have a chuckle and a laugh. This is what makes the beauty of comic books, man, the community. So, Gary, thank you very much for that answer. And I'll come back to you, man. But everyone, please stay involved as we go along. Because where I'm going to go to right now, and we're getting into the thick of it, because I'm going to bring the legends all up at the end. And, they're all legends, really. But I'm doing single file. I'm trying to get the pieces for all the viewers and the listeners together. And I'm going to focus right now on one of my great mates who, whether he realised or not 12, 18 months ago, taught me an awful lot about storytelling. And this is the beauty of, collaborating with people. And Ben and I, Spedsy, and great mate Ryan Ballard, who was mentioned before, did a little comic book called Ring Around the Rosie. And it was pretty scary stuff because none of us had inked each other, and we just, it was fun. We didn't know where it was going, but it was just one of those things that you do because you just like to draw and write and create stuff, and it was really cool. And I remember getting Ben's pages, and I thought, God, man, I am way out of my depth here. What am I going to do? So thankfully, Ben and I, spoke. We collaborated and we joined. I just had a great time together, and that's what the fun of it is. So I guess the next person I want to talk to is my great mate, Mr. Ben Sullivan, who is. Hello, buddy. How are you?
Yeah, you killed it, Lee.
Yeah,
you killed Rosie.
Well, I had great stuff to work from, man. I just added bits and pieces to the beauty that was already there. Man, now you are you're very much going, as we move towards the other guests, you are a very large part of the comic books that are coming up in a Kickstarter that we will talk about that's coming out in the next couple of months. And funny story. Funny story before we get to that, Ben, when we were doing Rosie and he had those pages, I said to Ben, send me the original pages. And he said, I can't send you the original pages. I'm like, why can't you send me the original pages? And he said, because I'm drawing on the back of some other pages and they won't like it if I send you the artwork that's on the other side. And I said, man, what's on the other side? And he was like, the Southern Squadron. And I was like, oh.
No, I wouldn't have done that.
Come on, look, I'll just drop Ben in it. So, Ben, you can shout pickles at any stage, but that's how I remember it. Mind you, I do like to elaborate such things and do like to, play around. So
Gary's taught me a lesson not to do that.
Oh, yeah.
A couple of times.
Yeah.
I'll stop.
That's fair enough, I was so close to getting some of those pages too, it is what it is. Dave, don't hurt him. Gary, don't hurt him. It's like, I just blew that out of the water, didn't I? Ben, you're on your own. See you later. And, so, mate, now, other than the Kickstarter we're coming up with, you're on Toby and the Magic Pencil Bud. So,
yes.
It was elaborated before in the newspaper. It's coming up. We've done a few issues. Now, am I correct in my knowledge that there was also has come out, is about to drop a 3D version of one of these comics at some point in the future? Could Ben or Gary possibly elaborate on that?
I think, Gary, you should probably talk about the 3D aspect of it, I suppose.
Yeah, look, I'll just mention quickly that the 3D Toby has been released.
Yep.
And unfortunately, out of the 3D, we've probably only got about 4 or 5 copies left. So they have sold really well. The next big 3D comic coming out, we'll see very soon. It's going to be a really good seller as well. And I can't say too much yet at the moment because it's going to be showcased later on, Kickstarter. So we'll just have to wait to see that. But unfortunately, the Toby 3D has been released, and basically there's not many copies left. So it's sad in one way, but it's good in another way because most of them are sold.
Oh, that's fantastic, man. Small comics out there. And that was one of the first 3D comic books in quite some time, wasn't it? For anyone that can answer that, because Gary's obviously ducked off to his portal over there.
I've just been back in. That's actually the 3D comic. We can't really see it at the moment. We have to put the glasses on. But that's that is the first 3D comic in Australia that has been produced totally in Australia for the last 40 years.
Excellent.
That's a total fully drawn Australian comic, including ads and everything that's in 3D. There's one more that we're going to put out very soon, and that's going to be part of the 3D U-Butte events that's happening.
Yeah.
I like to be a little bit bored and get out there with a lot of the new stuff just as experimentation to see how it goes.
Yeah.
And it has worked, and we're going to continue that with the next U-Butte Kickstarter that comes up.
Yeah, look, Gary, the word experimentation takes me back 10 or 15 years, man. It worked for me. I'm here now, aren't I? I've got a few things wrong with me, but I'm going all right, mate. You got to try things, don't you?
So, but back to Ben. Ben's done, I'll talk about it. He's done a wonderful job in Baby so far. I'm very proud of it. Ben is one of the best artists that we've got on it. He's very good at his imagination, which apart from the writing, which he had to put up with, his drawing skill and his imagination really, is outside the ballpark. He's done a wonderful job with it. It's all happening. It's one of those things. It's going to be first available this weekend if we're lucky. If we get the printers all coming through, that's another. So we'll see what happens. So it might be available on Saturday.
Yeah. We'll get now. Remember Saturday. That's the 4th, because you've got a thing coming up that we'll let everyone know about too at some point this evening. Very good.
So just once again, just quickly before we get back to Ben and the others, Ben's been doing comics for quite a while now, and we're getting a lot of emails and messages in regards to his work because he's starting to get a little bit of a cult following now. It's very interesting what's happening with Ben at the moment. So we've started to do letters pages in a lot of the comics now. And I don't want to give him a big head or anything because we won't get him on the show here next time because we won't get to see him. But the beauty about it is a lot of people are writing in about Ben. And I think what's going to really be the icing on the cake is there's 2 comics coming up very soon. One is Torn Southern Squadron Team Up, and the other one is Torn Dark Nebula Team Up. Both have his work on it, and this is just a bit of a showcase for what's going to happen with Torn Southern Squadron. It's just a bit of a teaser. The U-Butte thing about it is that it's basically it's going to be one of those really historic events that's happening in the last 2 years. That's with Southern Squadron and Torn and Dark Nebula, of course, and that's the reason why when I started Reverie in 2018, the one thing I wanted to do is get as many creatives that were past into new stories and get them going again because really the stories out there are so good, it's worth getting them back into the groove.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'll give you Ben. Ben, go ahead to talk about Toby, and then you can actually.
Well, I've got to say, this is exactly what Reverie is to me, is being able to do work exactly like that as well with Dave and Tad. I had, of course, Rob and Hayden on writing those too, but that's I don't know, that's a huge honour for me to be part of that. So I just wanted to say that to both of you. But my career is actually sort of locked in with Reverie. I think I sort of started at the same time you had the Reverie second round, and I've been sort of walking with Reverie. I sort of feel walking next to Reverie as it's been growing. With, I think the first thing was a cover which you paid me before I did it, and that was the beginning of all of that. What do I talk about? Danny, this is another thing about the inventiveness of Gary's ideas as well, to do the 3D thing and having it in the paper as well. That looks amazing, I reckon, Danny. That's the place that comics like that should be, is that sort of printed thing, and that's awesome, fantastic. And happy birthday, Rob. I didn't know.
Well, you do now. You do now. All right.
So yeah.
You prepare to keep talking, Ben, because as you talk about Toby and the 3D, and like, man, you know what's blowing my mind is all the things that you guys and Gary in particular are doing, and like these newsletters and fanzines and the 3D stuff and the pushing it into newspapers, bringing all creatives together, bringing old classic Australian icons back into things, birthing them into new life. The beautiful thing is that I want to push on to right now is Gary identifying people that started at a similar time to, I guess, me, and that's my great mate Spedsy, another mate of ours, Hayden, and identified something in them, and then said to Tad and said to Dave DeVries, I got these two dudes here that I think they got a little bit of something. Would you like to have a yarn to them? And then suddenly birthed into, things take time, but things gestated and things are all coming together. So you've got a molding of new and old, I won't say old, I would say classic. All right, let's go with retro. That's got a nice, bit of feng shui and things going to it, and I think a bit nicer than old, because old, it's a shitty word, really, and I don't like it. All things can be new again, and that's what's happening with Reverie at the moment. So Ben's part of what I want to bring into. I want to bring Dave Spedsy, even though I haven't spoken to these three gentlemen singularly. I believe right now, at this particular point in time, they actually this is where they can come together, talk and communicate about their experiences with each other, because the next lot of comic books that we want to talk about that is going to kickstart in the next, I believe Gary can correct me, but something inside the next 10, 12 weeks, if all goes well and things are rolling together, are these Torn and Dark Nebula and Torn and Southern Squadron comic books. So as you can see, everyone is connected. So I'm going to start with my great mate Spedsy, and mate, fire away, because you've been there since the beginning. It's we were both ads on the back of our first comic books together. So how's your journey been with Gary and Reverie, mate? Meeting some heroes.
Yeah, it's been the best. Like for instance, as you are well aware, as we're pretty close, so we tell each other stuff. There was a bit of a glitch in my matrix mid last year, and I saw myself almost ready to put comics behind me. I just was having just one of those moments. But I had one convention that I had committed to, and I felt weird cancelling it. So I went to BendyCon, and I was seated between Eli and Peter Lane. And those guys made me laugh all day long. Eli is an insane person. I just love him. And Pete, of course, we've worked together a bunch, and I adore him. And weirdly, I think it was the first time I hugged Gary, and he doesn't realize this, but I really needed it because he's a mentor to me and has been since I joined up with Reverie. And so to get that little, like, I don't know, like, come here, mate, and it just made me feel good. And, and Dean Rankin, Tim McEwen, there's a few other guys that were really nice to me that weekend, but it was the Reverie gang that made me feel like I was with buddies that had my back, sort of thing. I worked in a comic book shop called Alternate Worlds. I worked there for 11 years. It had its good times and it's bad times and whatever. But one of the highlights was this would be 2018 or something now. Rick McClune and Chimera #1 both landed on the shelf. Unbeknownst to me, Hayden Spurrell had come and put them on the shelf on a day I wasn't working. And when I walked in, I saw them both. There's the man there. Hey, Hayden. Yeah, and I bought both comics and I read both comics. And what I particularly enjoyed about it was that they were of high quality and they were Australian and they were local. And I wanted to be a part of it. I had released a comic book called Badly Beaten Boy in, I think, 2015, maybe 2013, 14 or something. I printed 100 copies and then just went, now what? And I still have about 98 copies left. I didn't know what to do with it. But one thing happened over the creating of it is that my drawing from page 1 to page 22, there was a huge leap in quality. Within my realm of what I do, there was a huge leap, and so I wanted to do that again. I didn't know what to do with it once it was made, but I wanted to make another comic book. So I sat down and I made the Devil's Toilet, a character that I had created when I was in my teens, heavily inspired by another mentor of mine, Nick May. And so that was sitting on my computer and had been sitting there for a while when I saw this Rick McClune and Chimera. So I emailed the dude in the back, Gary Della, and I just said, hey, I've got this comic book. I overcompensated. I had studied screenwriting and I had written 2 novels. And so I sent him all this stuff. I was just like, I swear I can do stuff. Please let me do it. And so he okayed the Devil's Toilet coming out on Reverie. And then, once I liked all the Facebook pages and whatever, there was a line written, something about advertising Rick McClune, and it said something like, this world is open and waiting for you to join it, or something like that. And I was like, does he mean as a writer? And so I sent him, hey, look, I would love to. I'm not just a toilet guy. My dream would be to write serious things. I just thought that my dopey cartoon style required a silly writing. Gary gave me a gig writing a Rick McClune issue. I overcompensated. I wrote 9. He said, would you like to try your hand at writing Torn? We need a new villain. I've now written, I think, 15 issues of Torn, because once you open the door and let me in, I refuse to leave, because it's too much fun being able to play in these sandboxes. Just today, me and Gary got new pages for a Gorilla My Dreams Torn team up that I wrote last year. And I wish I could credit the artists. I actually have never met them. It's all organized through Tim Stiles of Gorilla My Dreams. But it's that hasn't worn off on me. I've been chasing these dreams since I was 17, through music, screenwriting, novels, everything. I'm a creative person, and I wanted that to be my job or whatever. And of all the highlights and lowlights and whatever, when I first got thumbnails from Dragon, the first issue of Rick that I wrote, I got thumbnails through, and I'm on my phone. Just happened to get an email from Gary. First thumbnails are through, and I looked, and I was watching a movie with my wife, and I had to pause it, and I was screaming with enjoyment. The idea that someone had taken my words and not only turned them into sequential art, but I wish I could pronounce his last name. I'll just say Dragon V. Not only taken my words and drawn them, but he is an expert artist, and he had taken these moments and chosen camera angles that are just blew my mind. So yeah, very, very blessed and honored and grateful. And then, of course, I think what I should be talking about is that after writing a handful of these things, Gary presented me with an idea. Would I like to write Torn in the Southern Squadron, teaming up with Dave DeVries? Now, I wasn't a huge Southern Squadron kid, but I knew of them, and working at Alternate Worlds, worked for a crazy man named Joe Italiano. And when I mentioned that I was doing that, his mind was so blown that this little idiot that he had employed was doing something like touching comic book history like that. That I was like, all right, this might be more pressure than I anticipated. But credit to Dave. I self-deprecate a lot, particularly about my art style, but I'm somewhat confident in my writing ability. I know my flaws. I know what I'm good at. I know what I'm bad at. The main thing I wanted was to try and hold my own next to a certified OG in Australian comic books. And not only was Dave totally supportive and open to letting me play in his sandbox, but he taught me stuff without never once condescending to me, or you know what I mean? Like I was able to sit under the learning tree, but also I would happily definitely say I was 50% of that writing team. Like we jammed for hours on the phone together. And at one point, Dave we were sharing a Google Doc and we're on the phone and I'm typing while Dave's watching. And Dave was like, "Oh, sorry, this is rude. I shouldn't be like literally watching you type." And I was like, "No, it had gotten to a point where we were so comfortable, and I feel like, a little bit I was holding my own, but also Dave was so cool about it that I didn't mind showing my brain farts. You know what I mean? Just like here, I'm just typing. It's a brain dump until we find the right words. And yeah, can't say enough about the experience. I had an absolute blast. The fact that I got to work with Ben, but I didn't get to work with Ben, is one of the greatest shames of my life. One that I am more than making up for it. Me and Ben will. Sorry, I'm hogging the mic a little bit, but let me pee in some pockets. Ben swears he's not a writer, which is insane because we are actively trying to work together, and we share similar goals, and we are meeting regularly and planning out these concepts together. I will propose an idea, and with 2 words, he will make me seem like a genius, because he will just say the 2 words that tie it all together, and suddenly I'm just like, he saw an underlining message that I don't know if I consciously intended, but he found it, and I'm just like, whoa! And then just what Ben himself brings to the table, these ideas. I don't know what you think about this. It's a bit silly, and then presents this fully formed, amazing idea. Like Danny said, I fully say Ben is the best and hardest working illustrator in Australia at the moment, and a privilege to work with. And I should give kudos to, just while I've got the microphone, Peter Lane is someone who invites people into his universe as well, and he pays people to play in his universe. It's insane. It's an absolute privilege, and the idea bouncing, when you find someone who you can create with comfortably, where you can both just throw things at a wall, and I'm quite opinionated about what I think things should be, but also at the same time, I always disclaimer, only take the bits that you agree with and discard the rest. I have no ego attached to it. I just think this is how this should go. And Pete is amazing at like flicking things back and forth. And on a similar wavelength, this guy up top, Eli, it's always tricky when you first engage in a creative relationship. You don't know how receptive people are to ideas and whatever. and within 2 seconds, I was, Eli and me worked together so well, doing lettering on books and stuff, editing books together, an absolute dream. And tabling next to him, he's like, the thing of, like, Lee, you would know this, like, when someone gives you free license to just throw 1,000 jokes, and it doesn't matter if 99% of them don't land, you can. So being next to Eli, I just throw jokes, and he's the same. And 9 times out of 10, we just go, dude, that would. But then that 1 time out of 10, we are wetting ourselves. All right, so sorry, that's long-winded. Just to say, I love everybody. Also in Bendigo, I got to hang out with Tad. We got to talk about doing a Rick McClune issue together. So yeah, got good things to say about everybody. Love everybody. Reverie for life.
I'd just like to chuck in a thing to reinforce what you've said, Rob, with both yourself and working with Ben. It is such a magnificent event when these things happen, because the amount of absolutely brilliant, creative energy that comes out of it is absolutely, mind-boggling. And there's I mean, as you know, there's a project that I've got them to do now, which is the only persons I can trust to do it. And I will show you the cover, and that's this one here, because at the end of the day, what's going to happen is I trust them fully with these sort of issues, and they would be the only 2 people that I can trust with the Toby universe doing an offshoot comic.
Yeah.
And this here is basically a comic that is coming out next year about Toby's cat. So it's going to be very interesting what the 2 come up with.
Yeah, I'd like to just let you both know, Ben, particularly if you're the artist, there was some reference material you could possibly use, that came up earlier this evening on yeah, mate. So, if you've got to get a strange camera angle, and you can't find one on Google Images, you might be able to swing back on here and
you can write that in first, Rob.
Yeah, man.
You've got 2 to choose from tonight's video.
2 butts.
Yep, 2 butts.
Yeah, we'll get you the time checked for you too, mate. But look, what I'm seeing here, because I love listening to this stuff too, what I'm seeing here before I go to the greats, is I'm seeing just this is what I love about community and stuff, man. It's like everything working in its flow. It's like people start, people merge, people come together. There's dolls, you got toys happening, you got posters, you got people veering off to like human flies, you got like Eli doing his first comic book, and there's so much positivity and everything involved, and the creativity is quite something. And Gary, don't wait at the back of the class, mate, because it's like we'll have I've got 2 more legends to get through, and then it's open slather, all right? So you can play with your dolls in a little while, mate. Just need you to keep your hands together, boss. So just give me a tick. And so I'm going to veer off to right now, because I'm going to veer off to the man above, Spedsy, and it's Mr. Dave DeVries. Mr. Dave DeVries, thank you for being so patient, you and Tad up there, but I wanted to give you 2 some time here as well tonight, because one of bringing back in for me with the community and the mentorship we were talking about earlier, and what Gary brings is also, yourself and Tad, and these comics are iconic, I read them as a kid. You put, as well as other people of your area in that period of time in the 80s, with Cyclone and things like that. These characters are iconic, and I don't think there's too many Australian comic book creators or people that are collectors that are not aware of the 2 of you in particular, and just to allow your babies, essentially, to be vulnerable enough to take these characters and let them live in the hands of other fresher, younger creators and stuff, man. I think that is one of the greatest things that anyone has done. I've seen the growth in my friends from doing that. I've seen the growth in allowing both like yourself, Dave, you, Tad, communication, particularly a gentleman that isn't part of Reverie, but has been a great mentor to me, Mr. Gary Challoner, and Glenn Lumsden and stuff, who are all out there that, are very forthcoming with your information, very open, allow people to talk ideas, help you through the steps of what you need to do. As Rob said, like at those times of trouble, because we've all been there where we've had those moments where we were going to throw the pencils away and the typewriters and whatever it is, and go, but some nice gentle words of instruction and nudges, have brought us all back together. Dave, what I guess, and I'll go to Dave first, Tad, and I'll come to you last, man, and get your answer on this. What Dave would what was the overall impetus, man, that sparked you coming back with the Southern Squadron into Australian comic books, man? Because you did have a little layoff there for a while, as we all know. You went and did your, other things in life and family and teaching and etc. So what brought you back, man?
In a word, COVID. In all seriousness, look, I'd been to a few Comic Cons off and on over the years. People were saying they'd like to see what we were doing from the past. And I sort of found that a lot of the time when I was going to those, it felt like I didn't have anything new to share. And probably the most recent thing I'd done is interesting. Spedsy mentioned Dragan. He actually illustrated a bringing back of the Southern Squadron in a episode of Decay Comics, and so he actually illustrated that one, and that was back in 2015. Tad had sort of been keeping the characters alive by publishing them in this sort of coloured graphic novel. Gary Challoner was doing yet another version of them where they were being repackaged for his Cyclone Redu. Or Redux, or however that's now pronounced. So when COVID came along, we were all kind of recreated the Ugle Club, and then I met people like, I got in touch with Gary again, and I'm not quite sure how we just sort of stumbled upon each other. It was probably just that we were all sitting around bored, shitless, and not knowing what to do with our time, locked away. And since 2015, I'd been thinking about coming back and doing something with the Southern Squadron again. And as I was doing that, I'd sort of started to create this little master plan of how it was going to play out. And I think from memory, I sent Gary some notes and said, this is sort of what I'm thinking of doing. And I really liked what he was doing with Torn. I thought maybe there could be some sort of crossover. And God bless him, he sort of reached out and said, look, I'd really like to do that. And then he said, would you like to write something yourself, or would you like to collaborate with the regular writer? And I said, well, I think I'd like to collaborate. It'd be fun to sort of play with someone else. And while that was going on, Tad and I started talking about maybe doing some sort of crossover with the Southern Squadron and Dark Nebula again. And so that became, in the end, it sort of ended up with Tad and I working on a 3-part series together, and then me and Gary and Spedsy and Ben working on the Torn Southern Squadron crossover, which was also a 3-part. And then we sort of worked out that Ben and Tad and Hayden were going to be doing a 3-part with. So we thought, well, we've got Torn Dark Nebula, Torn Southern Squadron, Dark Nebula. Why don't we sort of weave it into not one big story, but one sort of big event? And I guess that's sort of where it sort of expanded. Beau Jardine also became interested in doing, I think he even contacted me before that about doing like the Southern Squadron Dark. So we thought, let's throw that in the mix. And somewhere along the line, I got I can't remember if Peter reached out to me or vice versa, but we started working on a storyline which I really like actually for Sky's Caravan, and so there were all these different ideas that were sort of flying. I'm also working on rebuilding the Southern Squadron as its own series. But while I'm doing all that, I'm also working on a movie which I'm trying to get finished. And so for the last 6 months, that's kind of been taking my emphasis, simply for one reason, that the editor I'm working with it has to immigrate to Canada in about a week's time. So that was sort of the deadline. So all of this was sort of happening simultaneously. And somewhere along the line, I think about 3 years ago, I wrote a two-part Rick McClune, which I really enjoyed. It was I sort of borrowed a little bit from Unforgiven, this idea that all these villains would all come to the same town at the same time and, all try to become out gunsling Rick McClune. And there was a film that was called The Quick and the Dead, which was directed by Sam Raimi, which I really liked. And so there was so every villain was sort of super, slightly larger than life and very kind of, iconic. So during the course of that, I tried not to kill them because I thought they might be fun to bring back in different elements. So at some point, I'd love to do a Southern Squadron Rick McClune. So all of this was just, I don't know, long answer to a short question. But yeah, I guess it just became fun. And I think also the motivation was that Tad and I suddenly realized that, holy shit, last year was what the Southern Squadron celebrated their 40th anniversary. I should have done some big event, but I didn't. And then the year before, Tad did the 40th anniversary of Dark Nebula. And 40 years is quite a while. And I was thinking, when I first got into reading comics in the 80s, I was a big fan of the Marvel stuff. And probably my favorite book was one of their first superhero books, which was the Fantastic Four. And when Southern Squadron was created was in 1983. Fantastic Four was created, 1961, I think it was. So that was only, I was inspired by stuff that was happening in Marvel that had only happened maybe 22 years prior. And to think now that, if you go back to the birth of Marvel, that 2/3 of that length, Southern Squadron and Dark Nebula, have been sort of, in Australia, been running for that a long time. You start to think, shit, this is quite a while we've been doing this. I mean, Christ, when I started, Batman was started in 1938. I haven't done the maths on this, but it would have been about 50 years. You start to think 40 years is a very long time, and so part of it was, it felt like they were a piece of Australian comic history, and maybe it was sort of silly to leave them in the drawer. And at some point, I'd like to see the characters, like when I'm 6 foot under, still being played with by other creators. So to some extent, there was a little bit, Lee, of the motivation of bringing them back and allowing other people to play with them, so that they become sort of part of the collective. When Tad and I were working with the other guys from, Glenn and Gary and Alex and the others from the Cyclone era, one of the things which I think made that era work was that we were all sharing each other's characters and collaborating. And then, I can't remember who mentioned Jason Paul. Oh, you did. Jason Paulus was doing stuff with us, and I've lost count of how many times other people had the Southern Squadron in their storylines or worked on them, or and probably more than the so-called canon that I did. And yeah, I really like that. I really like the thought that, there is this rich history of Australian comics and this sort of weird shared universe that I guess with Torn, when Gary brought me in, and then Tad sort of came in as well, and then Bo, indirectly comes in as well. And then of course through that we're connected to Gary Challoner, and through Gary Challoner we're connected to, he's crossed over with Killaroos, so that means that Killaroos now in the same universe. And then the Platypus has appeared in Headbutt the Hippo, so that's part of the same. When you start to sort of piece it together, all these characters have all appeared in each other's books, and there's a big Australian, universe of superhero characters. yeah, it kind of felt like it was something I wanted to play in.
Yeah, no, that's cool, man.
Yeah,
no, that's cool because it's like it seems to be the perfect fit, Reverie, from what we've discussed tonight, with everyone learning and playing in each other's sandboxes, as you said. Like bringing characters in and being free to allow other people to grow in those characters and try things and stuff. And man, like I think it's just added to the creativity, and creativity is a good thing. I mean, anyone that's watched this show would know that creativity saved my life, man. So it's like if people want to be creative and they want to grow and they want to dabble and stuff like that, like I mean, God, do it, like 100%. Everyone needs something, and creativity is a beautiful thing, man. So, Dave, awesome, man, that you allowed my friends to do that in your world, and it's awesome that you're going to allow other people that hopefully one day will be my friends or friends of theirs and friends of yours to play with your classic characters too.
Well, I'd give a big rap to Gary because I think he's kind of the glue that's binding it together, and Sizzle as well. I mean, there's this sort of there is this sense of community and a sense of everybody looking out for each other and supporting each other, and I think that's really super important. But this, like I know Gary sort of really has a huge. Sorry, Gary, I'm talking about you and your presence, but he's got this huge passion for the history of Australian comics and the past. And I mean, I guess through the Southern Squadron, we had the Crimson Comet in there as well. So that sort of links back to that era as well. And then Gary sort of appropriated Mollo the Mighty. So, they've all kind of snuck in there at some point. And I think it is a rich history. And I'm glad that it's not getting lost. It's not being forgotten.
Yeah. Well, there's plenty of creatives here that are bubbling away, trying to keep it alive, man, with you. So it's like that's the best thing. And that's definitely what Comex, not just Reverie, but Comex as well, definitely promote and push, as well as keeping Australian comics and creatives alive and all that. And let's not suggest to anyone that's coming across the Chinwag podcast for the first time and has heard me say that line and may take it out of context, because if anyone knows me, my catchphrase is community is unity. And quite frankly, I don't care whether you're Reverie or Comex or Oz Comics or Gestalt or wherever. I'm just proud to be part of the Australian comic book community. And that's what I enjoy most about doing these shows and, talking to you guys and seeing what everyone's doing. And I want people to get motivated by what they're hearing and seeing on this site and screen tonight, and all the other sites that are out there, because this is only a fraction of the great stuff that's out there from like as the guys said, from 40s and earlier through to now and future and beyond, man. So jump on the board, and have a look at all these sites and check them out. Now I'm going to just leave you there, Dave, because I want to talk to Tad, because once I've finished with Tad and I've introduced everyone, I'm going to ask you all what I think, while I've got such a big group of collectives, one question and I want everyone to chime in on this, so it will be a chin wag for a period of time. But Tad, mate, you and I have talked in great detail, and as we know, you were my first Australian comic book back in my day that blew my mind with you and Paulos and stuff. And I'm a particular fan of the Grandstander. And what I enjoyed most about him. But man, you've come back with a real explosion of creativity too, man. You've held on to the dream for a long time as well, man. Dave and had it inkling. You've had comic books by Shane Foley and stuff sitting, aside for 20, 25 years that you've brought back out, and now you've brought an end to, one of your classic series and stuff, and pushing on into more, Hayden has worked with you, and you've had Ben. What were your feelings of handing over Dark Nebula, or here it is, Hayden, when Gary came to you? Were you feeling similar to Dave, or you have your own machinations behind that thought process, mate?
Well, Hayden and I worked on the plot for Dark Nebula Torn, and that was a real collaboration in terms of plot. But the way I looked at it, the way I look at that series is simply this. There's all the glory in the world of having created the Dark Nebula. Let Hayden and Ben shine. So as far as the script goes, all I'm really doing is signing off on it. Any little bits and pieces I might need reviewing or whatever, or very minor editing, that's what that's about. But one very important thing I think everyone can take away with them is simply this: you park your ego at the door and make sure that the project does not suffer if you get in its way. I think that's so important. If ego gets in the way, the book's rooted. That's all there is to it. And I think if everyone's allowed a little bit of elbow room, that they feel like they're really contributing to this, not that, I've got to watch what I do, otherwise, I don't want to rock the boat. No, screw that. It's important that everyone feels like they are a part of the process. And that's why I like to see Dark Nebula Torn, or Torn Dark Nebula, whichever way you want to call it, as being basically Hayden and Ben can just rock with it. I mean, the story that we've got, I mean, you've got two characters. They're oil and water. They will not mix. They do not mix. Yet in this story, in this adventure that they find themselves having to work with one another, they have to mix. And something happens in the third part that really turns things around. I won't even hint at what it is, but it's a very significant moment, particularly for Torn. And it really is that significant that, it shows that there's something more than differences that people have with one another. And that's really what that's about. And if anything, that in its own way is us illustrating how this process works. That even if you, I mean, not that we don't get on or anything like that, because we get on famously. We all get on famously. We know that we pump a lot of pump enough positive energy into this thing. Of course it's going to be successful. Of course it's going to be the best thing you can put out. But like I said, you park your ego at the door and you make sure that the book does not suffer. And that's how I see that. And I couldn't convey that enough to Hayden and Ben, because the truth of the matter is I just don't want them thinking that, if they're walking on eggs, don't hop, to take a line from Blue Thunder. So yeah, that's how I view that, and I think it's great that when we do collaborate with one another, we feel comfortable with one another. Yeah, we don't take any we don't make any assumptions. I mean, if I can pivot to the work I'm doing on Torn, Danny, when you did your review of Torn 3 and you got to me, you said the two words that I thought, wow, you've pitted the ace on it. You referred to me as a script doctor, and that is hitting the nail right on the head. With Torn 3, I felt that it needed a script doctor. My role as an editor is that of giving the writer's voice clarity, no more, no less. But yeah, Torn 3 was a different situation. And I looked at that in much the same way, and this is me going back to the earlier days of Dark Nebula. When Glenn Lumsden turned in the artwork for Dark Nebula 3, I've got to be honest, that's when the lights really came on for me, because that artwork just took it to the next level. And I thought, you know what, I could do one of two things here. I could turn in a very lame Jerry Conway-like script where I could really go to town here and have fun with this, I went with option 2. Well, looking at Pete's artwork on Torn 3, it deserved the best script possible. It deserved to really shine because, you know, there's a very important thing I think we all need to carry away with us. We don't know how long we've got to tell these stories. So make every story, every page, every panel matter. Move your story along and make sure that when people pick that up, that they're not going to just discard it to one side. Because one thing I always joke with people is I'm glad that my stuff is more memorable than landfill, because that's my way of saying I don't have a big head about this. But the truth of the matter is we don't know how long we've got to tell these stories. So let's land every punch we can. Let's make sure that we connect with someone with these stories we're telling. And they come away and, you know, here we are, we're saying, 40 plus years of Dark Nebula and the Squadron and everything like that. How about the next 40? Let's look at that. And that's why it's great to be able to work with young creators, like with Spedsy, with Hayden, with Ben, with Peter, both Peters. Actually, Peter, one Peter's just as old as the rest of us, but that's another story. I'm just kidding. And actually, just pivoting again, Peter Lawson, you mentioned the feedback you got from Torn 3. I think the best feedback you got from Torn 3 is, hey, how would you like to draw the human fly? I'm sorry, that's a mic drop moment, because holy crap, congratulations. That's all I got to say. Every one of us in the room, we're astonished. We're not astonished. You deserve it. But it's great. It's great to see that you're getting recognised, and that's what this is all about.
Anyway. That's been a lot of money.
Yeah.
But
I think you're 100% right there with Tad. If anyone takes anything away from this tonight, is you can see Peter in a nutshell, Lawson's tale of starting on Torn issue 1, working his butt off, as we've all seen, and he shares his pictures and stuff, improving, getting to Torn 3, and then getting what is possibly like a dream of his that he's probably been thinking about since a little kid, you know what I mean? And he's had an opportunity, and man, that to me sounds like a pretty awesome story there, mate. You know what I mean? 100% on you. I hope you kick its butt, and do all the good things to it. But you're 100% right, Tad. I think what you said there, they're inspiring things too. Because the other great thing about having you and Dave on the show here tonight, talking and speaking to people that maybe thinking about comic books and maybe thinking about coming into it, you know what I mean? Eli's touched on it with you with a little bit and talking to you and things. I'm just going to take myself as a prime example, because I don't want to use anyone else as an example. I'm going to use me. When I came into this, I had an ego the size of a football field, right? Because I came from a small country town, and I thought I was top stuff. No one can draw like me. I know what I'm doing. Well, you know what? I didn't know what I was doing. And if it hadn't have been for people like Tad and Gary and, Spedsy and Ben showing me up and Gary Challoner in the background and varying other people, improvements and further love and a ferocity of wanting to learn and get better at my craft, and eventually that learning in there and that dedication to the craft seeped its way into I guess my life and stuff like that. And in a strange way, being part of this community has not just helped me with comic books and drawing in general. I've been able to get sober due to having some of these people that are on the screen right now in my life and being able to partake in what I'm doing, and people in the background, and so it's not just, I guess, not just the creative webs that, you know, like a link and people working together from 40 years ago to now, and new blood coming on, you know, like retro characters and new characters and all these beautiful things to create the wonderful tree of Australian comic book creativity. But there's a whole heap of other things that go on back there too. People become friends. People help each other. They got someone to lean on, because sometimes you can be that lone person out there in those little far off areas of Australia or wherever you are in the world. And, you know, it just gives you access to people with things like you do, and you never know where it will take you. And I think here's a prime example of a group of individuals that, through the common bond of comic books, creativity and enjoyment, and a love of, I guess, a hobby, a career to some extent, or just a compulsion to complete something because something within them is crying out for something else, has got them to create this awesome little band of creatives here that are pumping out stuff left, right, and center. And it's a great thing. And it culminates in Peter J. Lawson's beautiful story of starting on Torn issue 1 after many years of not doing a comic book and getting the Human Fly. So you're seeing dreams of all different levels of success happen to people, man. And I think that's a beautiful thing. So that's what I think is wonderful. Now, I thank you, Tad. You are a champion as always.
If I could just add one more thing.
Absolutely.
Torn 4 is going to kick Torn 3's butt.
Oh, cannot wait.
I'm not kidding with you on that. Peter's actually started turning in the pages for editing, and I just said to him, this is going to be a snack, because it's, you know, it obviously needs editing, but I'm looking forward to seeing all the artwork. I mean, I've seen the smatterings of it, as everyone else has on Facebook, but what I have seen of it is nothing short of sensational, and I'm looking forward to making sure that the words do the images justice, because a picture paints 1,000 words. Why drown a picture with an extra 1,000 words? The purpose of the writing is simply to get the art over the line. It doesn't need to be drowned out with a whole lot of waffle. Let the artwork breathe, and that's what we've done with Torn 3, and that's what I fully intend to see happen with Torn 4. So anyway, that's enough out of me on that.
Very good. Now, while I've got all of you here, and we're all in varying degrees of publishing and creating and history and all of these things, first time, like, you know, like long time, in between times. What's everyone? And absolutely, I'm throwing it open, right? You answer as you want to come in first. You chat amongst yourselves. You do everything you want. What do you think right now, currently, is the present and future of Australian comic books, the medium, health-wise? Is there something more? What direction do you think it's going? I mean, what's the overall feeling from everyone's experiences and feelings? Like, lay it out there. Let's go. I'll go first.
Mention.
I think that Australian comic books, comic books in general, are probably not seen in the same light by the general populace as what they once were by any of us on the screen. That's why I think that it's extremely, I see a lot of negativity. I see quite a great deal of toxicity in other countries' comic book communities. I see elements of it creeping into the Australian comic book community. And quite honestly, you know, like, I don't really have time for it, man. I just don't understand why people aren't working in the same direction to keep such a wonderful medium active, alive, in people's faces. You do have a rich history in Australia. You've got people that are all like have been overseas. There's 2 people here that have done it, chosen. You know, you got Peter Lawson living his dreams. You got Spedsy as a young fellow, you know, doing things. Ben, you got Danny Nolan studying the history. You got Gary over here publishing. You got comics in the background bringing people together in a community. And I just think sometimes that, you know, people need to put their negativity aside and start being a little bit more kinder to the people in the community, applaud work as opposed to criticizing it, because a lot of the squeaky wheels that I hear aren't doing anything. And I just find it really disappointing that they keep squeaking, because I'd be more than happy to listen to a lot of them if they did something. And I don't see the strength or the unity that being negative brings to a medium that is working right now with a lot of positivity to get it out there alive and pushing. And that is my thought. Toxicity is an awful thing. That's just me.
Lee, I didn't think of it from that perspective when you asked the question, but I think you hit a nail on the head. I know when someone asked my sister-in-law when she was having her first child, why would you bring a baby into this world with how crazy it is? And she said, well, why not bring in another soldier for good, sort of thing. And that just sounds like a cool poetic line, but I think, I've peed in your pocket about Chinwag, and I'll pee in my own with Drink and Draw, and all the shows on the Comics network, is that we are trying to be soldiers for positivity, and it is hard. It doesn't get as many clicks as the hate bait does, but also nothing's really gained by being a jerk. I have said that in the music biz, there were lots of jerks, and when I came to comics, I was like, "Whoa, everyone's so inviting and lovely." I was a bit naive with that. I think I stumbled into two very welcoming communities with Reverie and Comics. But slowly but surely, you do work out there are negative jerks that perhaps jealousy or something dictates the way they treat others. And you very quickly see, though, what happens to those jerks. If you are nice and you are kind and you have no ego about these things, you get to work with fellow nice, kind, amazing creators, and you learn how to get better at the thing that you're desperate to do. So, yeah, I don't see any benefit in being negative at all. The state of comic books.
When was there a better time in history to be alive than today?
I would have made a pretty sweet court jester back in medieval times.
And that's why when I hear people like that saying to your sister, like, why would you bring a child into the world now? I'd be saying, because this is the greatest time in history so far. Look, if he wants to check out, that's fine. But I think your niece or nephew is going to have a fantastic life. And no, I think the world gets better and better and better. And I think the thing is, people like to compare the worst of today with the best of the past. But in any objective measure, I mean, God, all this crap even about saying that, the world's population is getting too big, as though there is a direct correlation between the size of the population and the increased life expectancy and the improvement of living standards. Why are we frightened about the future? I just do not understand this. In fact, I'm worried about the population shrinking. I mean, we live in an amazing time in history. We all walk around with a freaking computer that could get you to the moon back in the 60s in our pocket. God, when I wanted to listen to a bit of music back in the 70s, I had to buy an album, and it cost me the equivalent of $70 in today's money. Now you just listen to it for free at a whim. Everything that you want to access in the world is amazingly cheap. And as creators, like when we started out, we had to basically pony up the equivalent of about $10,000 to $15,000 and hope that we would not lose more than a third of that money. And now you can print a comic and get your money back. The opportunities. I think the trouble is people just don't want to take risks anymore. I think I'm becoming my father now, but we're getting soft as a community. But seriously, every time Cyclone went to print, I think we dropped initially the equivalent of maybe about $5,000 Australian today. Imagine if you said, right, I'm going to print up the equivalent of $5,000 worth of comics and give them away for free. just to build up a marketplace, you would have been doing the equivalent of what we did back then. And most people shit themselves if they drop a few $100. So, no, I think the opportunities are there. The potential is huge. The ability to print is amazing. The talent is absolutely there. I mean, the advantage you guys have is you've got us to look back on and say, oh, well, they did it. When we were doing it, we looked back 15 years earlier, and it was Skippy the Bush Kangaroo. That was it. I mean, there's a history. There's this connection. There's this. I mean, the reason why we formed Cyclone was because we were the only people doing it. I mean, and Fantastic as well. Now, I couldn't even name you how many people are in the scene. So, sorry, I didn't mean to overtalk it, but no, I think the potential is huge. It's just whether we want it. That's all. But here's the great thing: even if 3/4 or even if 90% of the people are miserable and want to be negative, it gives a shit, because they're still the ones who aren't are still massively outnumbering the people who were doing it back in the day. And positive people, they're the ones who will be sticking around in 5 years, and the negative people, they always fall by the wayside. I just do.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree. And I'd just like to intervene here.
Absolutely.
The beauty about it is when Danny was talking about Toby in the papers, and the basic fact that, say, 12 months ago, a lot of the people were dropping it. Look, I've been asked on probably 4 or 5 occasions that they would like a Rick McLean and a torn newspaper strip. I haven't got the ability to do it, but that's what I get asked. So it's still out there, and it's what people can supply to these newspapers that they'll take them on. And that's what it's about. And talking about comics nowadays, if you look at it in perspective, back in the early days when you had Marvel and all that, there was a very small amount then. They were larger companies, of course, but when you looked at the indies side of things, it was very, very small. There was a lot of underground comics, but there was and it was hard to sell them back then, because there was a lot more. You had to do paper runs. You actually had to do snail mail. You had to hook up with a lot of the fan signs at the time, which was hard in a lot of cases, because they'd come out, they folded, new one come out, so that was hard. But now, if you look at it in perspective, the amount of comics coming out now in this time is absolutely incredible. Kickstarter is a good example of that, and that's just one of them, and that's just a small part of the cake, really, in one sense. And what's happening is getting back to say the baby issue. I'll go completely different there. There's people climb Mount Everest because they want to get to the top, and a lot of them die doing that. Which is not a good thing, of course, but at least it's there. They want to do it. They're happy to do it. It's a great challenge, and they do it, and they enjoy it. That's the main thing. And it's a bit like just everybody that I know. It's a hobby to a certain extent, because you're doing it for the fun of it. You like other people reading your stuff, so it's fantastic that way. And in my case, I go to the extreme and like to promote a lot of the older comics as well, because we've got a magnificent history in Australia, which people don't realise, and most of us only touch the very tip of the iceberg when they talk about that, because there's so much information out there that it's not funny. But with our general groups now and what's happening out there, you're very right in a lot of ways. There is so many comics coming out now that is not funny. And when you're looking at people now, the positive amount of people out there, they're going to be around for a while, because they know the situation. They know what it's like. A lot of them are negative because I'm going to get rich because I'm going to put out this comic. They put it out there, oops, we've got to go and promote it. We've got to sell it. Oops. I don't know. Oh, that's a bit rough. We've got to go here. We've got to go here. Go to South Australia. Look, I've been to Perth. I've been to Northern Territory. I've been to Brisbane with tables. And it's not because of the cost of it. It's because it's damn good fun going to those places, talking to a lot of creatives, and of course, selling the comics if you can. That's the beauty about it too. But it's such a massive social environment. It's not funny. And the majority of them are very good people. And that's what makes it worth.
Lee, you need to do the 10,000 hours. That's the simple truth of the matter. And I think a lot of people want to skip that stage. It takes 10,000 hours, not just to build up your skill and your talent, but also you need to do that to build up your your relationship with the audience. If a mate of mine, Daniel Best, actually did this book about the history of Todd McFarlane and how Todd got into the business. Todd was a mate of mine back in the 90s, and I mean he put in his 10,000 hours. He was like the Beatles, they didn't become overnight successes, but people kind of forget that bit. Success comes from, look, put it this way, I've never known anybody to fail if they persevered long enough. If you just stick at it long enough, you will succeed. The reason is most people, they often get a little bit of a taste very, 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 very early on in the piece, and then they think, oh, that's cool, and it's going to get better and better and better and exponentially. No, sometimes it's just a long, slow grind. But you learn your craft, you develop it, you draw. I mean, I know Pete and Ben will be superstars, not that they aren't already well on the way, because you guys just aren't stopping. You just keep going, and that's the same with you, Spedsy, same with you, Pete. Gentlemen, Danny and Eli, I don't know you very well, but it's just keep doing it, and it is really just as simple as that. The thing is, 10,000 hours is a lot of work. It's like, if you start to think about it, you add up 40 hours a week, and when it's full time for 5 years. Very few people can afford to do that. If you can sneak 20 hours a week, rain or shine, it's going to take you almost 10 years to get there. But then when you look at the people who are huge successes in the music industry or huge successes in film, most of the time they don't do it in their mid to 20s. And the few that do are usually child stars who got older, and they did their 10,000 hours from the age of 7 to the age of 17. Most people, it's in their mid-30s before they really bite. And that's putting in, that's just spending every spare inch you've got in your 20s making this happen. So that's why some people succeed and some people don't. It's just simply because the ones who don't, the journey's too hard. But all you got to do is hang in there long enough and you will succeed. I have not known anybody who persevered long enough who did not succeed. It's really that simple, but it's that hard as well.
The other sorry,
you've got to park your ego at the door while you're at it. Like, if you're starting up,
that's not going to happen.
Some people don't do that.
You know everything, you know nothing. And you'll never know anything. You've got to be prepared to take feedback from other people, and sometimes it might not be good.
Look,
it's that.
I talked about this to my students at uni because I teach a little bit of comics there, and it's that people don't know what they don't know. When the Ugle Club started up in Sydney, it was really common that Glenn and I would be there and we'd be talking about our experiences with the Yanks, and then we'd have locals who would come in and they would look at an American and they would compare 4 things that the American did with 4 things that they did, the same 4 things, and they would be better than the Yank in 3 out of the 4, and they would be probably line ball on the 4th one, and they go, this is ridiculous. Why is this guy getting work and I'm not? I'm better than them in 3 out of the 4 things that matter. And the answer is because it's not 4, there's bloody 10. You don't even know about the other 6. There's your problem. It's like you don't know what you don't know. And that's usually what causes people to fail. They think they've got the answer, but they don't know what they don't know. And sometimes it's those mundane, boring things like solid storytelling and pacing, and sometimes during the poster shots isn't the answer. So it's just. But if you keep going at it long enough, I can't remember it was our 3rd or 4th trip. Glenn and I had cracked most of the companies, but not Marvel, and we're going, what do we got to do? And the answer was, you just got to get better. And then one day, suddenly discovered what the other 3 were that you missed out on. And it really just comes over. Ben, you'd know this as an artist that, just every once in a while something clicks and you go, oh shit, I didn't even know that was part of my repertoire. And then suddenly,
Yeah. 2% of the time, maybe, if you're lucky. It's rare. Yeah. You keep going, just keep walking.
Yeah,
absolutely.
The other good indicator of the situation at the moment is zines. There's such a massive creative outlet out there with zines, the photocopying and drawing a lot of things now. It's just incredible in Melbourne. It's just, there's so much out there. And that's a good indication of how popular a lot of this sort of creative activity is going.
But that's always been there, Gary. The zine
I know,
market.
yes, it has.
Yeah, decades. Yeah.
It
Whereas
has.
the comics, do you find that there is the difference between comics now and comics, we'll go to the 80s, is there's no longer presently a mainstream. There just seems to be
The 80s.
That's what's happening. You can forget the popularity. There is no standout, comic that's just kind of like. I know even music's the same at the moment. My son's in a popular band in Melbourne, but to fill up 200, get 200 people into a place, that's considered great these days. We used to go out in the 70s from Tuesday to Saturday. There'd be bands on the radio, and you'd be hanging off the rafters. You couldn't even get to the bar for a drink all that time. At least even then, there's something that there's no person or thing that is just going to take off overnight. So it seems like a very level playing field, but there's no superstars. Everyone seems to be on a level playing ground, and because of that, that's how these communities have built up. Yeah, it's hard to describe, but can anyone tell me an Australian comic that has sold in huge numbers in the last 2 decades? I'm going to say Toby's probably the biggest one.
2 decades, I might be wrong, but you'd have to say Dylan Naylor's Dar and Dill stuff in the show bag.
Yeah, but that had the show bag distribution. There's no distribution anymore. There's no news agents. There's no Gordon and Gotch from the 70s. Dylan, his stuff in the early 90s did have the show bag. He was placed in show bags, and he also had kid zones, which used to be on the checkout of the supermarkets.
Yeah.
But that's not happening now. I think that was the last great, big seller. So
Dylan's comic, Danny, would be one of the biggest sellers in Australia at those. You're talking about the timeline.
Yeah. But
he had a very good distribution system through the show bags. In the 70s and 80s and the early 90s, you still had distribution here, but there wasn't that many people that would be willing to risk it going through Gordon & Gotch or the other distributors. Now there's no distributors. And if you refer it back to the music industry, there was a lot, and the same consequences were happening, is that you had so many pubs here, you could go to any pub and have a good band, but now
the radio stations, you just don't even seem to have that.
The distribution was basically bands through the pubs, because that's what got them famous. They got a following, and that was it. Comics were the same. The ones that went into the Gordon & Gotch, they had a fairly good distribution, and I'm not talking just about Reverie. I'm talking about all the others. At least they sold them because there wasn't many Australians out there at the time. And referring back to the music industry, the same principle was that there was a lot of pubs in, but what happened with all of them, the distribution dried up. There's nothing.
That's what I'm saying. That whole area of distribution of marketplace is gone now. So it's harder to find your market. The young people these days don't seem to be interested in anything tactile.
They do, because I'll tell you something. With before COVID, of course, there was many events that the libraries would open up that give you free tables, and you'll take your comics in there. We sold a hell of a lot of Tobies back then. Through COVID, we were lucky because we got those sales, but which I don't talk about too much, in the sense that a lot of the comics that we do now, I do on the side, and I keep it quiet, because what happens is when a school approaches me and says, "Look, I've got a whole heap of kids here. Can you put out a comic for us? Because it looks really good." If it looks like it's like Reverie publications, so it really gets the kids excited when they can see all this stuff printed. So what happens is I'd go and print 30, 40 comics for them and send it into them, and those kids would be wrapped. And so far I've done about 15 of those so far. So it is happening out there. And it's a good event. It's growing. And it is growing. The only really recognition I can give to people now is the studio, the studio now in Liverpool, which I put out their comic as well, which is they gave me permission to basically showcase that as well, whereas the schools I can't, because it's a privacy thing with the kids. But they can do it in class, if you know what I mean. So they can do it away. But it is growing out there, and a lot of the families, believe it or not, we all grew up with comics. We read comics. We learned how to. Some of us learned how to read out of it, etc., etc. But that's what the trend is slowly going back to it. It's not, I'd say it's probably only 5%, but it was nothing before that because everybody was on their computer, the TV, skateboards and stuff like that. But it is growing slowly. So it is happening out there, but it's going to be a very long process. But with that long process, that's going to give you the 10,000 hours, so that maybe later on, if you're still around, you'll do well.
Mm. Oh, well, that's good, because I leave myself with the paper was our goal, because to me, it just looked like comics had disappeared, except for a couple of phantoms. That's all you'd ever see in, there aren't even news agents anymore. There's a few kiosks, and that was all it was. But that's very encouraging news from you, because before
look, it is. If we ever have Danny, if we ever have a conversation that we just focus on this sort of topic, I can give you probably 30 creatives that have done comics that are now well above everybody else.
Well, Gary Challoner just sent in a comment, if Sis can bring that back up, that gave Trudy Cooper's Oglaf is huge and Neverlanders with a question mark.
But Neverlanders had a major publication company, and that was almost a book. That is a fantastic comic, but that had a lot of money behind it.
So would you think when you're suggesting that like independent, like this independence and mainstream, and that obviously like with Neverlanders, we're getting to a point where once it was, if you got into a newsagent as a comic book, it was fantastic. But for me, what I'm looking at is I'm seeing that the emphasis seems to be on trade paperbacks and getting them into your bookstores, like whether it's a DVD or a Dimmicks or something like that.
What I'm saying is there's no real mainstream. Everybody's independent, and because of that, there seems to be more of a community. It's shrunk. I think you've got a lot more choice. It just seems to be a lot smaller than what it was. And I think that is something to aim for the future, that it will grow. Maybe the kids will be like, every generation changes things. And who knows, maybe comics will become what vinyl has become. All of a sudden, everyone will think, oh, I think they got that right the first time, didn't they? I might go down the comic shop. And
interesting that a moment ago, the word literacy was brought into it, and I think that's a very important thing. We go through waves where the focus is on trying to promote literacy. Like this goes back way before our time as well, when they did the Australian Pictorial Social Studies. Who my partner's dad was the art director of them. A fellow by the name of Ken Rafe. Now, back in the 50s, they put these things out because kids weren't reading. And so they gave them education in the form of these comic books. And a lot of people, a lot of creatives got to do work on them, including Monty Wedd. These were paying gigs. Some of the guys I'm not familiar with their names. Maybe they were going under nom de plumes. But then we have our different waves throughout the course of our, I'd love to say industry, but, there's no industry in this country. It's more like a guild. It's more like a club than anything else. But, kids today, right now, can go online, go to thedarknebula.com, and they can read adventures for free. Now, if that's not helping to promote literacy, I don't know what is. But pivoting, we're talking about kids with their handhelds and everything. I remember this friend of mine, she was the manager of the community radio station I was at for a great many years. And just, I just thought, I'm just going to give her a copy of one of my books for her son to read. And it was an interesting reaction in that he didn't know what it was. It was one of my colour trades, and he's trying to figure out what to do with it because it wasn't a handheld, it wasn't a computer, it was like, there he was all digital, and here it was analog. And it told me then, and this is going back, maybe 10 years ago or so, or maybe not even that far, that, a lot of this is lost on kids. And I would like to think that we're going to have that paradigm, as you said a short while ago, Danny, where it comes back around and kids start reading again. Because I've noticed a lot of libraries do have their graphic novel section, and a lot of us we learnt to read through comics. I mean, when I was 5-6 years old, people wanted to know what I learned from comics, and I knew that there were such cool words like amazing, fantastic, incredible, invincible, fantastic, all of these words that all I knew was they meant something cool. And and that was me elevating my vocabulary because of what I was picking up in the comics. That if I can just if you just indulge me one more story. Back when I was married, my ex-wife was a school teacher, and I gave her, like a heap of comics for her kids to read in class to help promote literacy. And there was one kid who wouldn't even read comics. All he was into was skateboards. And, and she didn't know what to do with him. And I remembered there was a dreadful Neil Adams comic called Skate Man. And I had a copy of it because it had a Paul Power backup story in it. So I pulled this book out and I said to her, here, put this under his nose. The kid devoured it. Then he moved on to the other comics, and he eventually got onto literacy. He was reading books after that. And that's the progression. It's just a matter of how do we get that cycle happening again.
To be honest, I don't want to create comics to help kids learn how to read. That's not my motivation. I mean, if that happens, well and good, but that's not the main game for me. And Danny, I guess the argument would be, look, the reason why Cyclone was successful in the 80s was we had a very clear idea of who our audience is and how to reach them. And when I say clear idea, we were constantly looking for ways to improve that approach. The various techniques that we used to achieve it weren't always perfect at the beginning, but we refined it over time and we got better and better and better. But what we did have going for us was we knew what people wanted back then. I don't know if this is true today, but at that time, Australia in the 80s was feeling very left out of it, and then suddenly things like Dundee happened and Mad Max happened. That was late 70s. And in excess, suddenly we had a hot band, and suddenly people in the rest of the world gave a shit about who we were. And we started to say, like, why can't we have our own version of Marvel, all be in a very small thing? Now, was that the only approach to comics? Absolutely not. Gary wasn't playing in that space. Gary Della wasn't playing in that space. Neither were Fox, neither were Reverie. Neither were Fantastique. But it worked for us, But we had a very clear idea of what we were trying to do. What I would say, any creator. The problem is it's not the distribution. You can always find ways to get the books to the audience if you have an audience. The advantage that we had in the 80s was that people did go into the supermarket or the newsstands and rummage around and find comics. And so if we threw enough of them at them, eventually they would find us. And the goal was simply to stay alive long enough to build that audience up. That's what needs to happen. Kickstarter is not the answer. That's at
No,
best. How many are you
definitely
going to reach? 200-300 people? It may be a case of literally going to the comic shops, handing them 500 books and saying, here, have them for free, give them away to your readers, and then I'll tax them next time round. There's and to say that people aren't reading comics, I don't buy that. In America, the sales of DC and Marvel are in the toilet, but manga's going through the roof. There's probably more people consuming comic book style material in America now than in any time in history. The Yanks are getting it wrong. The Japanese are getting it right. I think the question needs to be why. What is it that's turning people off one type of material and onto another? I talk to my students at the uni, and they're all reading comics. Absolutely, the tangible, artifact has not disappeared. It does still exist. It's just that we're not moving with the times.
You forgot about Europe, Dave.
Sorry,
you forgot about Europe as well. They are into a lot of good graphic novels over there. There's a massive sale over there.
So
the question, audience has got to find the goods. You have to find
the audience. That's the point.
Yeah. Audience and commercial value of it.
Yeah, and just using the old techniques isn't the answer, because we've tried this. We've thought that Kickstarter would do it. It's okay, but if you're happy in printing 200 or 300 units a time, Kickstarter's for you, and wonderful. And maybe you can increment it up at 50 per year. But I'm not interested in that. I want to get to 10,000.
That's a question. That's a question that I would raise, Dave, is because obviously on Facebook, etc., and your varying socials, you do see people with Kickstarter campaigns. I mean, everyone here has been part of them, so no one's going, this is a query that I've wondered. I've seen a success, regardless of numbers. I guess it depends on what the individual behind the Kickstarter's drive is. You know what I mean? Like, some people, to me, seem just to want to cover the print and play the long game. I'm going to make the print. I'm going to keep them in stock. I'm going to sell them at cons. I'm going to sell them slowly. That's their business proposal. So I'm not giving anyone any curry here. I'm just making and
if that's what you want to do, great. Go with God. That's awesome.
You've got other people that want to make 15, 20 grand. Give themselves money for 3 or 4 months to pay the rent and to do that sort of stuff, but then they seem to fall into the traps. I mean, the loopholes of not having comic books ready for varying reasons. Things take time. Not everything is in our control. You know what I mean? Like, anything can happen. And I'm watching even the American dudes. They're booming at 12 months ago, and now they're not making half as much as what they want on the Kickstarters. I have a question for all of you. Do you think everything has its time? And do you think Kickstarter is coming to an end where we may it's overdone? It seems to be like bushka, and I'm just asking the question. I don't care whether people do or don't. It's entirely up to the individual, but it's just an observation I'm putting out there that, from my perspective,
it's part of a bigger package. It's not going to solve the problem, but it's not going to disappear. But it's not the great salvation either.
So, I mean, outside of that, Dave, at this point, because you seem to be the most vocal, and I'll ask you the question. No, that's cool. I love it. I like it, because these are just thoughts that I've had, and this is just what Chinwag comes into. So anyone can dive in. Dave, if you had your opportunity and you were, going to do your first comic book, right, and you'd sort of been seeing this Kickstarter thing, or you thought to yourself, oh, bugger it, printing's cheap, I'm going to print my, my own, I don't know, 500, 100 copies, however many you want, what pathway would you go down?
You know what? I'm still working through that. I can give you some of the things that we did. Some of the stuff that we did with Cyclone is that we adopted all different approaches. So it was like Gary Shannon and I would we would go to the lobby of the Megaplex, and we would have a big cutout of Flash and the Night Fighter, and in polystyrene, and we would be there selling books, and then and we would have permission to do it because we're value adding to people hanging around, buying tickets and so forth. we would go to the comic shops and organise signings and so forth, and that worked. Anybody who was in the city, we were in Sydney, so we were able to sort of walk into a lot of the comic shops and sort of develop that one-on-one relationship with the comic stores. But in places like Perth, the cost of getting the books to them were ridiculous, and so we'd say, "Oh, look, we're just going to send them like 30 books," and we'd just say to the guys at the other end, "We don't want any money for them. We just want you to just sell them to your fans, to the ones who you think the most going to appreciate it." Yeah, cheers,
I've got to go. I'm having a diabetes issue. So thanks for the chat. I'll see you guys around.
All right.
See you, man.
Take care, mate.
See you, mate. Good to see you again.
So, Lee, we would literally, for the interstate comic shops, we would say what matters more than anything else is that we have a presence there. So we would literally send them the books and say, sell them and you get 100% of the sales, or pay us for the postage. It was something as simple as that. Because when you start to add up the amount of money that you're going to get back from those sales, like let's say you're getting $30 or $40, it's like it's not worth it. That $30 is better spent in the pockets of the comic shop guys who are going to say, if I sell this for $10, I get a profit on every single book. That gives them an incentive to move it. That was something that these are different strategies. Look, I don't know. One thing that there are advantages which didn't exist when we were doing it was there were no comic conventions. Now there are. They're mainstream. They're common. So I know Gary Della and DK. These guys were sort of they frequent those conventions, and you can slowly build up an audience and a market and so forth. But I think more than anything else, I'd be saying, what do the audience want to read? And how do I give them what they want, and how do I develop that relationship? We did what Stan Lee did. We would have the comic. We put a huge premium on things like the letters to the editor. We put a huge premium on things like the editorials. That idea of developing that close relationship. You've got social media these days. I don't know if you guys are sort of running a dialogue with your audience, getting them to suggest storylines and so forth. I mean, it's a huge amount of work, but to my mind, if you're saying how would I progress today, I would say, okay, I would spend at least 50% of my energy building my market, building my audience, and the other 50% of the time actually writing and drawing the comics. But the truth is, creatives tend not to like to do that. They just want to draw, and then once they're done, put it out there and then hope that somebody can sell it for them. Unfortunately, if you do that, you need to have somebody who's willing to sort of get out there and beat the drum and pound. And I suspect that the most successful, around this group are people who have that willingness to do that.
Well, that's the double-edged sword of it, isn't it? Like that's the double-edged sword of it from a creator's perspective. I mean, Spedsy and I have spoken about this. Is like, I mean, for me, like I do this for varying reasons. Chinwag, because much like yourself, I love comics. I love the history. I love meeting people. I learn. It's a great sensation, but there's a part of me as well that knows as a comic book creator that I have to put myself out there, you know what I mean? So that people may inadvertently be drawn to my, comic books or my artwork and stuff. And I am not 100% comfortable with it. Rob, and if Shane was here, would know I've had multiple conversations with them where I've had anxiety attacks. I've had huge issues with being, doing this. But you have to do it. I mean, I definitely agree with you there. You do have to get out there. It's very scary to put yourself out there. There's no doubt. But the point is, it's how it is. But then there's different lanes, isn't there? Different levels of success. I mean,
who I would research? The San Francisco Underground of the late 60s, early 70s. I reckon if you research what they did and how they achieved their success, it was on a small, intimate scale, but they had a very strong, solid audience. It may be that, like, I know that the army bases and the universities were their prime, target audience. I think gone are the days if you can just throw it out to the four winds and hope that somebody laps it up. It needs to be a very targeted approach. People, I think we need to be very specific about who do I, in your head, what does your comic book reader look like? And the answer isn't anybody who likes reading good comics, because that's just a bullshit, shrug off. It's no, my comic book reader is 45, bald, and you know what I mean? You zero in on
me.
Yeah.
Not me, mate. Plenty of hair, just turned 28. So.
Oh.
And maybe you're going to the pubs and selling them there, but you single out the pubs that also have bands, and you make sure that the genre of the bands they play at those pubs are the same genre as the audience that you're reaching out to. Look, it is a commercial approach, and it'll probably be very different for every one of us. But it's all about who is your audience, how are you going to reach them, what are you willing to do, how long are you willing to stay in the game, and also how much money are you going to spend. The reality is that until you have an audience, I'd say until you got about maybe 1,000 loyal followers, I wouldn't even try to make my money back on any time I print. That's not the goal. The goal is if you're printing up 200 books and you're covering your print bill, you're not really, because you're not covering the cost of your time and your effort and your energy and all of that stuff as well. It's easier to actually go out and do a real job and then lose some money by then using that money to actually then fund your habit, which is getting this comic. And it's what you're buying is the time to build your market and your audience. I think we're just too satisfied with, if I get enough people to pay my print bill, that's success. I don't see it like that.
Well, there's the other thing. There's no middleman between creator and audience.
Yeah.
So it is.
You have to become that middleman. There's no kidding. Yeah.
Yeah, you are it, and I suppose that's a bit scary. And there's another thing that because of the cost thing and the time thing, is that if you're going to run a series, you're going to have to be continued on your last panel of your comic. Are people going to be patient enough to wait a year for part 2? Or is
make
it
them
just
self-contained stories?
Just sit there and do a one-shot. Just maybe people should concentrate on that. Maybe the long-form stories, maybe just wait until you've done the whole thing and release it as a trade.
It can be episodic, but still wrap up each story at the end. Yeah.
Maybe trades are the answer in one-shots.
Yeah.
It's hard to say. You can't predict the future. That's the whole thing about any industry. You cannot tell the future. You were talking about population. In the 70s, somebody wrote the book The Population Bomb and said by the 1990s, China and India would just perish because they could not feed their populations. Here we are in the 21st century, and who are the most vibrant economies on the planet? It's just ridiculous. You cannot do the future because you always have what's around you as your guide. Who would have thought that news agents would disappear, that newspapers would become almost obsolete? We have no local papers where we are anymore. They were common as mud. They were always in your letterbox. Come COVID, they all disappeared.
And yet vinyl is coming back, and I don't believe it's for the audio quality.
What's that, sorry?
Vinyl albums are coming back, and I don't believe that's...
They're already here, and that is my one hope for the comics.
That's not... I don't believe that's because of the audio quality.
It's a community.
Yeah.
I think when they are better, hopefully people will come back to comics like they did to vinyl. Even cassettes are making a comeback. Because... And that is one great hope. Maybe nostalgia will kick in. And
people do like the experience of reading and reading tangible objects, and collecting. These are things which, you only have to go into the comic shops. The problem is they're not buying comics; they're buying figurines, and but that still tells me they want shit. They want to hold it.
Yeah.
I think you, when you said creatives don't want to do that, I think it's in the name. Obviously, we want to create. We otherwise we'd be called marketers. I think that's why the beauty of a place like Reverie or Comex is because so I wanted to try and see what it was like to do it myself, and I did Sluggish, and I realized that then last year when I talk about a glitch in the matrix and whatever, I realized that Sluggish would die with me because I was the only one promoting it. Whereas the Devil's Toilet, when I'm not at a convention, I'll see photos and it's on Gary's table. I'll see work of mine on the Comex table. I think the middlemen are out there. It's just a very low-paying, no-paying job, and I think there are middlemen who perhaps could take advantage of some people. So it's hard to find the right person, the right trust, etc. I think too, Kickstarter, I think when you're talking at the level of, say, where I am, and those a couple of levels above me, Kickstarter has been abused by a few, and I think that then gives a bad rep to the whole thing. Whereas there are lots of people who use it very smartly, and it's a print cost covering thing, and it's also it's a difference. Like when you are tabling, you're selling to randoms with the idea that then that random might hopefully like your comic enough to find the little Instagram or web handle that's on it. And even things that I quite enjoy, I barely go out of my way to find the next one. I have to be, holy shit, this is the best ever, and then I'm going out of my way to find the next one. So I've sold I've sold a bunch of the Devil's Toilet, right? When I do a Kickstarter, it's to those loyal. When you make a sale on Kickstarter, you get that person's email address, and so you're essentially hounding them to remind them, you know, that book that you may have kind of liked. Here it is, and it's only a click away. You don't have to meet me in Geelong in 2 weeks' time on table 44, and bypass all the other awesome things or whatever. I think I totally understand the Kickstarter bashing because I've seen it abused. I've been inundated with guilt-based marketing of like, we're a day away and we still were $100 shy or whatever. And I understand all of it. Everyone's just struggling to get their thing going. But I think Kickstarter is a tool, and this tool sees the benefit in it. But at the same time, I see the flip side as well. I was talking to Ben the other day. Part of me working with Ben is because a couple of years ago, like we've stated, Ben is one of the best to ever do it, and I thought the only thing in his way is there is no middleman for Ben, because Ben he's not active on social media and all that sort of stuff. So it was altruistic of me, but also very I wanted to ride his coattails, and I thought, well, Ben, let me do your Instagram, I'll get you in front of people because you're a sure thing waiting to happen, and then I'll ride the success train with you. But Ben said something very poignant to me the other day when we were trying to. He's lost the password to his Instagram again for like the 20th time. And I was trying to fix it for him, and he was like, but Rob, this is time I could be spending drawing. And I was just like, that, and I completely get that too, because we're creators. We want to sit down and create. And there's nothing worse than when you have to sit down and on the to-do list is to market whatever thing. And you're like, no, I sat down because I was hanging to write or I was hanging to draw. I don't want to have to, pimp this and pimp that. So all that to say, I'm sitting on all your fences.
Ultimately,
the alternative to the middleman is community. That is what helps bridge that gap. As Lee keeps on saying, it's community that keeps things going, because that community will take that comic and put it on their table, and someone else sees. Like, I will go to, and Peter will have different stuff on his table, and I know you've had different stuff on your table, Spedsy, and Gary's got God knows what. And look at Shane. Shane has everything, in his shop. He's, Comex is a publisher, but he has Reverie and all kinds of anybody's stuff on there. So yeah, community does fill that gap of the middleman.
And I've heard it. People kind of decry the community that, and there's validity to it, that we're all passing the same $8 around, as in, like, you buy Devil's Toilet, and then I buy Sky's Cabin Library, and then Pete buys Toby, and it's the same $8 going round and round and round. But we all came to this medium because we love comics. I don't buy everybody's comics because I don't like everybody's comics. I want to read these things and I want to collect these things. I was at a market the other day and there's boxes and boxes of Spider-Man, and I ask, is there any Australian comics? Because that's where my heart is now, not because for any other reason. I just want to read them. I want to collect them. And I don't really see a problem with us buying each other's work, like that being a negative thing. There's a support aspect, but I buy them too because I enjoy them more than I'm trying to support whoever.
Ultimately, the right idea is there, and that's it's like a big jigsaw. Everything falls into place, and ultimately, when you look at the big picture, when you see that jigsaw done, you've got to look at it in the marketing side of it and trying to get the right market, which is what Dave said, it's what others said, and that's the hard bit, because you've got to make it commercially viable. And to do that, you have to do a lot of experimentation, and that's what a lot of the publishers need to do. You do lose a lot of time, you do lose a lot of money out of it, but ultimately you get the idea and it just comes to you slowly. And when you're talking about Kickstarter, that's only just part of the jigsaw puzzle. It's to be used as such for the ultimate goal. And,
I mean,
the same
my
with
view is you need to have your core market, and then the stuff like Tad was talking about, where once you've got something that's successful, then the rich gets richer, because then suddenly the schools will say, well, we want to have the kids to read. This is a comic that is, successful, therefore we'll get them to read this one. It's the old Pareto effect, the 60, the 80-20 rule. That, once you get to it's almost like that thing, where two people are walking through the woods, and then a lion roars, and then one of them starts to put on his runners. And they said, the other guy says, well, you never outrun that lion. He says, I don't have to outrun the lion, I just have to outrun you. And to some extent, there's some truth to that. That, the people who will succeed are the ones who stick at it the longest and have a very clear understanding of who is going to be actually reading their material. That's not, but the difference is that the person who runs the fastest, the first, can then drag the others through the door as well. But at the moment, I think, Danny, you made this point, we're all kind of at that same level. Nobody's sort of running ahead and sort of breaking new ground. And I think that's the thing that will captivate the audience, but somebody needs to be able to get people inspired and go, I haven't read a comic in 1,000 years and I'd like to start reading again. The Phantom isn't going to do it anymore. It's got to be something new.
What something to aim for is who wants to be remembered in the histories in 40 years' time? Who wants to be the Dave DeFries, the Tads, and the Glens and the Garys in 40 years' time?
Well, because Lee, I was going to say you'll enjoy this / hate this, but to put it into wrestling parlance, Dave DeVries is Hulk Hogan, Tad is the Macho Man, Gary is Ric Flair, and wrestling is an all-time boom in the 80s, right?
Oh, exactly.
And then you come along, you're Shawn Michaels, I'm calling it, I'm Bret Hart, you got Razor Ramon down here, and wrestling's in a quiet period, and it's not till Stone Cold, like, we don't know who Stone Cold Steve Austin is yet in Australian comics, but he's coming. And when he comes and takes comics to the next level, they'll go back and they'll go, what happened during this little quiet period? And find that some of the best wrestlers ever were wrestling during that period. Just the fans didn't know it yet. And I say that as the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be, Bret Hart. Thank you.
It's an analogy, but it's true. It's, in 40 years' time, someone's going to be doing a history, and you want to be one of those people who gets remembered for doing this, for doing that, for doing this. It's something to aim for, and that might be good.
I think the best way to do it, Danny, is I think what we're talking about here, regardless of all the mechanics and the times changing and distributions changing, I mean, everything evolves, and you've got to take you've got to take a look at new directions for travel on that. But the one thing that's kept it up is I took great motivation and creed from the Dark Nebula. That led me to pursue others, Issue 1 and Fallen Angel and Cyber Swine and, Southern Squadron, and then, then the Jackaroo, and going backwards in time and fell in love. And then who's to, and it comes back to, I guess it is a long-term thought process, but I would think that you want young people to be attracted to the medium. So therefore, it would be my thought process that you would be as positive and as kind and as uplifting to young people that want to pursue their interest in comic books, creativity, and encourage them as much as you gentlemen have. And it might be a long road, and there might not be as much money in it or distribution or anything like that. But I think everyone has different lanes of passage and motivations. Like Dave, you want to sell, 10,000 copies of a comic. That's cool with me.
Yes,
that's your motivation, Like some people
Actually,
are happy
funny
with the
enough,
house.
it's not about
Some
selling
people are happy
10,000
with the
units.
job. I understand, but for me personally, Dave, I can tell you right now that for the first time in 2.5 years, in about 2 months' time, I'm bringing out the first issue of Battle for Bustle after an extremely long period of hibernation due to varying circumstances. And quite frankly, I'll be perfectly honest with you now. I don't care if my mum is the only one that buys a copy of it, because this issue is for me.
Yeah.
And I have a different motivation than others. I'm not right and I'm not wrong. I can only tell you from my perspective of how I feel about things. I'm going to just trudge along, because I've come to the conclusion that for me personally, I've found a place where I fit. And I love the community. I love the friends I've made. I love being in the company of you and Tad and Peter and Ben and Eli and Gary and Danny and all the other people that I've met.
All the other people. The only one on the screen you didn't mention.
Oh, I don't have to mention you, mate. But it's like you're already there. We're linked. Like, that.
But Lee, the point I'm saying is I don't care whether I sell 10,000 units. I want 10,000 readers.
Yeah, yep, understood.
And if you just want one person to read your book, that's fine. But and maybe that's enough for you. But Danny was talking about, how can we be relevant? How can we be? That was my impression, Danny, was that it's like we want to be culturally out there. We want to, people can walk into the newsstand and actually see our work. Okay, well, we're not going to reach them through that technique. But what was kind of cool about the 80s was that we were culturally relevant, or at least to an extent.
But
it feels a little bit at the moment like we're all, as Spencer said, we're all kind of doing it for each other. I want to reach out from beyond this circle and talk to a wider group.
Yeah,
and it may be that giving them away is the answer, not selling them. I don't know. Maybe that's, but
No, I totally get that.
I'll tell you what I'm doing. I don't really write comics anymore. I've kind of given that away now. I tend more to do my writing. And since Gary and I talk about putting Toby in the newspaper. That's my passion. That's how I want to help comics, because I believe in Toby. I think it's one of the best things in Australian comics at the moment. It's well written, it's beautifully drawn, and it appeals to a huge audience. And so I'm like, we've got the with the Free Comic Book Day on Saturday. I'm not going to flog my comics. I'm just promoting Toby. I've got a contest where we're giving away copies of Toby for the young ones, and for the older people, we're giving this away.
That's our third butt shot for the night.
For the comic. That's all it is. There's probably something by each one of you in here. So that's and that's what I want to do. I want to promote an Australian comic that I believe in, and you know, if I'm not going to make them anymore, I'll help promote it, and that's what I want to do.
The interesting thing about a lot of stuff is, Danny, is that you're doing. That's the way to go with a lot of these things. You have to find your audience. You have to get out there and do things, and that's look. There's a lot of things happening behind the scene with Toby. There's a lot of things happening. Ben's got a little bit of an idea with what's with some of the promotional stuff that's coming up. But there's a lot of things that are happening that if we get the right time, the right people, Toby's going to have a massive audience. So we've just got to wait and see what happens. But you've got to think outside the box. You need that readership to get anywhere, to get anybody else to come into the scene. And I'm talking about if you can get the readership for one comic, it's going to attract a lot of other comics coming.
It's going to spread. Yeah.
And that's the beauty about it. And the idea of the newspaper was just one event that's happening, and it's got it out there, and people know about it. The schools, when I go to the schools, I give away 30 copies to whoever will talk to me or want to talk to me about the art experience, and to try to encourage the kids, because that is a seed that you're putting in the thing. So even though I've probably printed about 10,000 copies of Toby up to date, and that's only with issue 1 and 2, and that's of course being mindful of the amount of different artists that have come to me and put covers on the comics. But you know, one third of those comics have been given away to hopefully those that will not so much buy Toby, but will get that seed going that they'll start enjoying comics again. And that's the beauty about it. But the commercial side of it is a different aspect, and it's what we're working on now behind the scenes. And that's what we're doing. So you have to look at every avenue you can. And the same with Rick McLean. Rick McLean's going to a lot of places now. It's hopefully going to be printed over in America. We're showing, believe it or not, we're showing Dave's issue now that's going to come out in the next probably 2 or 3 weeks. It'll be finished. That issue itself will go overseas to Europe to look at at least 5 publishers. This is here. I don't know if you can see this. This is yours, Danny. This is your comic that you wrote. It's going to be sample printed overseas with Blue Moon Comics. They've got the option of just printing that themselves and showcasing, and that'll have another two comic strips in it that will showcase other artists in America. So that's another thing. So you have to think outside the ballpark if you want to get the readerships. But a lot of that stuff's free. Don't get me wrong. A lot of that stuff's free for 1 or 2 issues, or this issue or that issue. But you get that, you build up that readership, and that's what you have to do. And Dave's exactly right, because what it does, it boils down to your readership. You've got to build that readership. And another thing is why I opened up Reverie to a lot of other people, because once you get that community in, and once you get the people in there, it all expands. It's a domino effect, and just the fact that something simple like putting Rob's comic into another comic, or Ted's into another comic as an ad, it just expands the whole thing, because you're looking at it. Because if someone picks up Toby, or someone picks up Torn and they like it, and they look, oh, this is another comic, I'm going to go and buy this to see what it's like, because I know that Reverie is pretty good. And it absolutely works, because I get a lot of feedback on it. And now that we've started putting You'll see that Rick McLean, you'll see that Torn, Toby 3 has now started getting letters put in it. It is actually working. So it's I don't know if it's 10,000 hours, but at least I think it's 20,000 hours, but it's working. Right? So it's something that
so your confidence of growth in the industry, in the community, is very high.
It is, because I've seen it working, but it is a hell of a lot of hours you've got to put into it.
Yeah.
And a lot of people can't do that, or they won't do it, or they get very disjointed. So that's going to happen everywhere. But the positive side of it is that everybody that sticks to it, they're still out there maybe in 5 years' time or 10 years. It's a positive thing.
Yeah.
You know what? When you go, a good example that I was always told, the biggest thing that you've got advantage for you if you're selling a product is how much you showcase it. And that showcase depends on how you do it, of course, but the more you showcase it, the better off you're going to be. And a good example is circuses. I mean, circuses is not out there very much anymore, but the showcase of the circuses now is that they push and push and push. So it's one of those things. So you've got to get out there, show. Even if you go to a con or if you go to a table, it's the biggest showcase, because people walk past you. They'll just walk past you. If they can see something in the background that's showing something, or TV that's running, at least you grab their attention. And the real fun with most advertisements nowadays, we've got to walk past someone 7 times to say, oh, okay, well, look, I might look at this now. It doesn't always work, but the majority of it does work.
Thank you, Tony. All right. Well, gentlemen, I think that we might start winding it down. I'd also like to say that I think everyone's opinions is valid. I think it's a beautiful thing that communities can come together with varying degrees of opinions and just the ways that they would like to operate amongst the comic book community, and everyone can have an amicable and good chat and like talk about things and nut things out and communicate. And it's all healthy. Whatever your path out there is entirely up to you, as long as you just want to keep creating and join in with comic books, because it is a wonderful community. So before we leave, I'm going to go for one quick lap around the room, and I'm going to give everyone their last say before we head off for the evening. So I'm going to head straight down to Tad P. Mate, what have you, the last thing you'd like to say for this evening?
Well, going off some of the things we've been talking about, and the fact of the matter is, at the moment, we're fortunate to be experiencing something of a renaissance, and that's a great thing. On your question, Danny, about 40 years from now, I'm reminded of how we've seen ebbs and flows in Australian comics, in that we had such a great golden age of Australian comics, and then everything literally devolved because it all sort of fell apart. The last big thing I remember seeing before my book came out, my first book in '82, was, of course, the work of Gerald Carr with Brainmaster and Vixen and Vampire. And that, for me, was the inspiration to keep moving forward. And then, of course, Cyclone, and, well, in its own way, also Reverie, and we everything catapulted after '82. I mean, there was Oz Comics, there was Reverie, Cyclone came into play in '85, and then when I came back to things after about a decade off, and I was at a supernova. And looking to relaunch Dark Nebula. This was 2006. Jason Paulus and I were doing a talk in this room, and one of the first questions that we got hit with showed me how some people just really didn't know their history, because there was one guy who said, "Oh, can you tell us why there's never been an Australian comic character that's ever been popular overseas?" And I could have destroyed him on the spot, but I just very quietly said, "Well, actually, I can think of one character that takes us all right back to the beginning, has anyone in here ever heard of Felix the Cat?
Mm-hmm.
And that told me that I was in a room with a whole lot of angry people who were folded, with their arms folded and holding their breath, waiting to be noticed. And at the same time, a lot of creativity had devolved to just the photocopied and folded mini comics. So much so that the next year, when I came to a supernova with the first couple of my colour trades, and everyone on Artist Alley wanted to know how the hell was I able to do this stuff, and I was very giving of my time. But it told me that things had devolved yet again from, we built things up in the 80s and 90s, and all of a sudden everything sort of slipped back to that. I'm hoping that what we're doing right now, with our renaissance, will help to spur things on. I mean, the technology's on our side, what with print on demand and everything like that. So things are looking very hopeful. I would like to think that things won't devolve too much to the photocopied and folded mini comics as they had in times past. So I'd like to think that the future's so bright we've got to wear shades to rip off a song title. But if I've got to put another 10,000 hours in it, so be it. I'm there. I'm there for the long haul. I have been, and I will continue to be. So that's my 2 cents worth.
Well said, mate. Thank you very much for being a guest tonight, and thank you.
Thanks for having me.
It's always a pleasure, mate. Mr. Peter Lane, your thoughts, mate?
I've just enjoyed the conversation tonight and enjoyed listening to all the perspectives and sitting back and taking in the knowledge. It's been great. But yeah, I just hope that the Australian comic community turns into an industry at some point and just expands onwards and upwards.
You're the British Bulldog, Pete. just of the current. Anyway. Sorry.
Well, thank you very much, Peter. And to both you and Tad, I wish you every success moving forward with all of your endeavours. And thank you for being on tonight. Peter Lawson, what are your thoughts, mate?
I think it's probably, for me at least, the best time to be involved in this creative endeavour of making comics. The technology today has meant we can reach out and we can have meetings like this with other people. That people are seeing your work, whereas back when I was younger, you'd draw at home and no one would see it. You could send off people, but you never even know if they got it. Like these days, at least you can get the stuff out there. Don't do it for Facebook likes. That's a pathetic way to gauge anything. Facebook likes, the algorithms just kill you, but at least you can make contact with people now. The last few years, I've got to know Dave, I've got to know Tad. Gary reached out to me because he had seen stuff I'd done on social media and gave me an opportunity to start. Now I find that I'm collaborating with Tad. Tad's editing my script that I'm writing. I'll be working on him with another secret project we can't talk about that I'm very excited about doing. The Human Fly thing has come along. Like, none of this had come along if the world wasn't what it is now, where you can reach out and talk to other people all over the world and make those connections. You've just got to be prepared to do it, to accept that you might not get a lot of feedback, but people are seeing things. And yeah, like everyone's been saying, you just put in the work and enjoy it and do it for the love of it. Don't do it for any other reason. Primarily do the work because you love doing it and you want to tell stories or tell stories or whatever. Just do it for love. That's the best way to go. That's it.
Well said, Peter. And thank you, Fourth Monkey. Thank you, Peter, and thank you very much for being on the show as a guest tonight. It was very nice to see you, man. I haven't seen you in a long time. And I wish you every success with the Human Fly and your project moving forward. And all your hard work has paid off for you, man. So keep going. Don't stop. Mr. Ben Sullivan, my friend, what would you like to say?
I was listening closely to what you guys were saying about the industry, and I think it's because of Gary that I can put my head down and just keep working without having to worry too much about some of the dilemmas that the real world sort of throws at you. And Gary just puts the work on my plate and try and get it done as fast as possible. That's what I want to say is a thank you to Gary for having me in Reverie this whole time. And this is a major part of my career in this. But that's it.
Well said, mate. Nicely said. And thank you very much, Ben, for being part of the show this evening. You and Spedsy are definitely clicking the guest numbers up there, mate. So I might be out of a job by the end of the year. But mate, I wish you every success too, Ben, and thank you for being a teacher in the last 12 and 18 months, man. Because I wouldn't have grown art-wise without you, man. So thank you. Appreciate
Excellent
it.
Yeah.
To my great mate Spedsy, what would you like?
Yeah, thanks, Lee. Because I was remiss thanking a few Reverie people earlier. I named a whole bunch of people, but I should have named a few more. Hayden Spurrell means a lot to me because he was Gary's go-to guy before I pushed my way in, and Hayden could have pushed back against that. He could have, that could have been messy, but instead we became fast friends, and we became together Gary's go-to guys. So that was one of the first, when I said I came in and everyone was so nice. That was one of the first on my solo Chinwag with you. We just talked a lot about how sometimes I can go into new relationships a little bit judgy or suspect or cynical or whatever. And yeah, Hayden was so welcoming and so just like sharing the wealth that it really opened my eyes. And then it's just that they became a partner in storytelling. We threw ideas back and forth with each other, because the beauty of working for Gary is sometimes it's their gig is there's this guy called Rick McClune, and he's an outlaw, he's a nomad, and go, and that's all you know. And then other times it's like, here's Torn, here's his villain, I need them to go back in time, and then they need to go back and they need to press this button, and it's so full on that you've got to juggle all these balls. So having a fellow creative who totally plays in that same box is good. And Sis, can you mute Tad's mic? Because holy moly. And then I just wanted to say thank you to Ken Best as well. Ken Best was a workhorse. I have written a lot of Torn, and he has drawn a lot. I think he's drawn 6 of my issues. He totally goes in for the wacky stuff that I propose. His stuff has been improving with each page. And so, yeah, he's been a great fellow creative to work with. And then someone who I definitely loved working with is Peter Fairfax, who I got to team up with on Larrikin and Just, which was one of the harder of the Gary projects, or where the first issue, where the synopsis was fairly laid out. There was plenty of room to play with characters and whatever, but the the plot of that first issue was very much I need them here, I need them there, and then I need them here. And it could have been daunting, but it was really a fun challenge, and creating characters with Peter Fairfax was an absolute joy. I just wanted to say sorry to Peter Lawson, because Dana Lawson is my favorite Lawson artist. I've never worked with Pete. I've worked with Dana a few times now. Who else? Of course, I wanted to thank Gary Della, because, as I say, with Badly Beaten Boy in 2013, I didn't know what to do with it. Devil's Toilet 1, I didn't know what to do with it. Perhaps I would have found Sizzle years later. Who knows? I don't. Gary took me under his wing. He showed me how to do all of this, and I like to think that I took the ball and ran with it. And Gary doesn't ask for anything in return. We've signed no contracts. He just rings me up and, would you want to do this? Do you want to do that? Do you want to do this? Hey, can I put Devil's Toilet over here? And it's a very it's just a good relationship to have. And then Lee, I just you said about me and Ben clicking over how many times we've been on Chinwag. Brace for more wrestling. So Ric Flair is in the WWE Hall of Fame as both being a solo wrestler and as part of the Four Horsemen. Triple H has been in solo, but also as part of G Generation X. I've been on this podcast solo as a member of Rosie, as a member of Reverie. And I believe in July, I'm doing something even more special on this very show. I don't know if I'm allowed to tell anything about that as yet, so I won't. But I'll just say thank you, Lee, and I'll save further soppiness for July. But this show is a time capsule of this Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels era. We might not be selling thousands of copies, but there are a shit ton of us at the moment, and there are more and more every day. Like Stu Thornton, Fourth Monkey, just releasing his new comic book with Comex. So many people watching this show and Drink and Draw and whatever, and picking up the pen for the first time, or for the first time in a long time, or bringing comics to life that people like Gary, Sizzle, and you, and I like to think with Drink and Draw, I played a tiny part. Just all of us doing this stuff and doing it in front of people, keeping it on Front Street. Just very grateful. And I think, we might not have 1,000 readers, but we have 1,000 creators, and I feel like we didn't have that 10 years ago. So, there you go.
Well said, mate. Thank you very much for the kind words. And Spedsy, I wish you every success, mate. I'll be right there with you, watching you, mate, same way as you will be me. So, got your back, brother. Mr. Dave DeVries, what's the last thing you would like to say, sir?
I've really enjoyed coming on this evening. I'll preface everything that I said before by the fact that I was in response to the question, Dave, what would you do? And that is, I guess, the key thing. That's what I would do, because I, like everybody else, resort to what I understand and what I know. And so that worked very well for us in a form back in the 80s. Whether that would work, and it would obviously clearly have to be modified in the modern era. I don't have all the answers, and I think we will all find our own path. For me, my path was always find the audience, find the market first, and then the money will flow. And that would be, I guess, the only approach that I would have. What I would say, though, is that the reason why we were reasonably successful with Cyclone was because we had a model to work off. We looked at we looked at Marvel, and we basically were trying to do Marvel in Australia, not just in terms of content, but in the whole approach. We looked at the way that Stan and Jack worked together. We looked, and in many ways, my relationship with Gary, and then also with Glenn, and now with Tad, has been very much that type of relationship, where it was very much collaborative, and I'm honoured to have been able to work with Spedsy and Ben in a similar manner. And so I would look not to Marvel anymore, because I think if you look at where Marvel is right now, considering their size and their scale and their potential, I think they are punching way under their potential. But there are other people like the manga, various crowds out there who are highly successful and doing very well. That's where I'd be turning my attention to. I'd be looking at who are doing it well at the moment, because there are more people than ever worldwide reading comics now than in ever any other time. We're not in a slump. And maybe as Australians, we need to look beyond Marvel and DC. It worked for us, but it might not be the path that people need to look at now. Interesting. And thanks, Danny, for sort of getting that conversation rolling. But I don't know what the answer is, but I do know that the answers are out there. My response would be to look at those people who are doing well and find a way to do the Australian version of that. Lee, I want to thank you for putting this on tonight. I was looking at some of the past shows. I think we've topped in terms of length. I think this is over 3 hours.
Yeah, pretty close. I don't know. Tad and I got up there, mate. Like Tad and I got up there. So
with that, I'm going to shut up. So thanks, guys. I really enjoyed it. And Gary, we'll see you tomorrow, mate.
Thank you very much, mate, for being a guest on the show. Thank you for being a big part, like you and Tad and Gary and the Cyclone Cruise, for me and influencing me when I was younger and getting me, like inadvertently in a strange way into this place to be with you guys. And great honour and thank you for being on the show again.
Very kind of you to say that. Thank you.
No problem at all. Mr. Danny Nolan, sir, what's the last thing you would like to say?
I'd like to say thank you for letting me come on tonight, Lee. Also, I'd like to thank Gary for giving me another chance, 5 years ago, out of the blue, accepting a couple of comics that couldn't find a home, and then asking me to write some stories, just come out and write some stories, which come out, and now I've just found out the one's going to be on sale in America pretty soon, which is pretty mind-blowing. Thank you for that. And because I stopped drawing 20 years ago, and writing comics is just something that I'm not big on these days, so I'm having a rest from it, because I tend to like my history, and he's given me an outlet for that as well. Letting me do my little pieces about how I looked at things in the past, and also by giving me very old comics to explore and to review. It's been a pleasure. And so even though I'm not actively really doing comics anymore, I still feel like I'm involved, and thanks to Gary for that. I appreciate that greatly. So thank you, sir. I tip my hat to you, even though I'm not wearing one.
Thank you for being on the show, Danny, and thank you for being a supporter of Australian comic books, and thank you for being part of the community, mate. You're a welcome member, especially now that you're looking after like the history of comics and stuff like that, man. So don't ever think that you're out of it, man, because you're right in it. So cheers, man. Thank you for being on the show. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Gary Della, what is the last thing that you would like to say for this evening, sir?
We just got to look at this in a very different perspective, and all I can say, it's one hell of a journey. It's just it's mind-boggling. We've got some fantastic people around us, and we've got the future to look to, and that's going to be the fantastic outlook in what we're coming up with. And the people that even here now, the people that we've shown, there's another 3 or 4 companies or groups in Australia that are really moving forward with comics. And this never happened 5 years ago or even 10 years ago. It's a completely different changed environment now. So it's going to be very interesting. A lot of things are happening behind the scenes with a lot of people. There's a lot of things that are happening with me that I just can't say. So we've just got to just plod along, and when it hit the fan, it's going to affect everybody, So it's going to be very interesting. And just the people here alone, it's just, for me, it's just such a wonderful experience because Reverie, even though it was back in the 80s when it started, just now, just alone, we started the foundation back then, but it was sort of wiped out, it left for a little while. But now the foundation that started now is absolutely brilliant. It's just growing, and I would say in the 80s, Reverie itself wasn't known around Australia to that extent, but now it is. You go to a lot of the, I go to a lot of the, even the tables in a lot of the other states, and people come up to you and say, "Oh, I remember you in the 80s. I remember this. I've bought Reverie. I've bought Toby. I've bought this." So things are actually changing, not just with Reverie itself, but with a lot of other people that are putting out comics now, because it's getting really, it's a big event now, and a lot of the comics now are Australian comics, and creatives are going overseas with a lot of things now, which is good. You know, you have to look at the Deep, for example. You've got to look at Neverlanders. You've got to look at Olaf. There's heaps out there. A lot of people don't talk about it, but it is happening. So it's a really good time here and now to be into comics, and that's going to be the beauty about it. So there you go. It's one hell of a journey.
Thank you very much, Mr. Della, for being a guest this evening. Thank you very much for taking a chance on all of these guys. Thank you very much for taking a chance on me. And you are correct in that it has been a journey, because if you hadn't have taken Battle for Bustle, I certainly wouldn't be sitting here with Chinwag, and I certainly wouldn't be in the company of you guys, and I wouldn't be in the company of a lot of other people I've met and pursuing a purpose and a path. So thank you, sir. And for Reverie Comics and everyone involved in the creative side of things there and your future endeavors, I wish you every success. And I know as part of the community, you know, like it's your success is everyone's success. It flows, it all moves together, and it goes forward, and that's the community, it's the unity. On closing for me this evening, Sis, there was a comment from a person called Absent Minded. If you could please bring that back up, mate, if you're there. Now, Absent Minded in the first one says, "Fantastic show, guys. You inspired me." There's one more that comes after it, buddy, if you can put that up as well. Absent Minded, as a woman who enjoys comics, thank you all for fostering safe spaces for all creatives. I would think that I'm not going to go into show acts of kindness. I'm not going to talk about next week's show. I'm not going to talk anything more about unity and community is unity or thank anyone. I think that Absent Minded has summed up exactly what this show has been about tonight. It's what I try to portray with Chinwag. I know it's what everyone, not just on this show, but everyone I know in the books tries to put across. It's their creativity and how they feel and the community side of things in Australian comics. And I'd like people to take note of that. I'll say it for you once more because I think it's incredibly important. And I think that's probably the greatest comment that I've seen come across Chinwag. So, says, chuck it up once more, buddy, and let me read it out, and then we're going to rock and roll. So, Absent Minded says that if he doesn't want to do it, everyone can go back. Here we go. Here we go. There's all Fourth Monkey, all these Aussie comic book legends in one show. I'm starstruck. It doesn't really matter. You can go back. But the point is, it is about creating safe spaces. It is about allowing people to be themselves in whatever lane you want to do, whatever creative endeavors you want to choose. I'm particularly proud of that comment, and thank you, Absent Minded. That's made this night even better. So thank you very much. Thank you for watching Chinwag. Good luck to Reverie. Keep drawing, and as always, Chinwag will be made with love. Thank you.
This show is sponsored by the Comics Shop. Check out comics.cx for all things comics and find out what comics is all about. We hope you enjoyed the show.